There's an African proverb that says, "The child who's not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel the warmth." What time in your life have you been closest to starting the fire yourself and burning it all down? I have two sisters, one older and one younger. My mum worked hard to make sure each of us felt special and loved. My dad, not so much. He called my older sister Princess, and my little sister was referred to as Little Buddy. For whatever reason, I got kind of forgotten about. I didn't mind most of the time. I found my dad annoying, demanding, and at times unreasonable. I hated the way he pushed my mum around and would lash out about things that didn't make sense. Basically, I thought of my dad as a total brat. He'd have a bad day at work and would find someone to take it out on. Usually, my mum and I. But still, I tried. I'd try to cuddle up with him, feeling hurt when he'd shrug me off and tell me that I needed to shower. I made gifts for him. I got good grades, I won poetry contests. I won awards through the Bible quiz. Never argued, but it never seemed to work. Before long, he'd find something to yell at me about. Things that usually didn't make sense. If my little sister and I fought, the whole thing was always my fault. My feet naturally turn inwards. I hated it when my dad would come to my sporting events because seeing me run with inturned feet seemed to be humiliating for him. One time I was running from one base to another, feeling exhilaration because I'd done it. I'd hit a home run. But the smile died on my face when I heard my dad yell, "Run with your feet straight, you look stupid." As a teen, my mum really stepped up and started insisting that he was going to leave me alone. He was never physically bullying, but the way he talked to you made you feel like he was trying to say something that would break you. When I was 15, he was almost successful. I went through a couple of really bad months. A friend died, my dog died, we moved, and my mental health was tanking. A week after my friend died, it was a car accident, my dad asked, "So, when are you going to get over it?" It took me by surprise because at that time I wasn't crying or acting out, I was just sitting there, eating dinner with the family. My mum immediately reacted, gasping out a surprised, "John!" and the two of them began fighting again over my dad's need to mess with me. I sat there, head down on the table, thinking, I'm not allowed to be sad, I'm not allowed to feel happy, I can't get mad, I'm in pain and he just finds it annoying. Just leave me alone, Dad. Leave me alone. That's when it clicked. My dad, for whatever reason, just seemed to hate me. I could try to make him like me, but it wasn't going to work. As I got older, my goal just became to avoid him. His seemed to be to forge a relationship with me for the sole purpose of having a target for his need to bully. We were never going to have a healthy father-daughter relationship. And that's when it clicked. It's not me, it's him. My sisters could like and love him, but I didn't need to respect him. I was done trying to please him, trying to do the right things, trying to be the daughter that my dad seemed to want. Fast forward to almost 10 years later, after the birth of my son, my dad had tried to begin a new relationship with me because for whatever reason he latched onto my kid. For the sake of my kid, I let my dad have a relationship with him, but I'm always monitoring, waiting for my son to develop a personality that would change the way my dad saw him. There was no way I was going to let my dad do to my son what he did to me. Fortunately, my dad died before the change could happen. I sat in the back of his funeral, dry-eyed and satisfied. Of course, my sisters were upset. They had good relationships. But for me and my mum, it kind of felt like the Wicked Witch was at long last dead. No more stress, no more unreasonable expectations. The eggshells we'd been walking on were swept away and we could be content. I have an uncle in West Virginia that I started to see as my father figure. At first, I jokingly would call him Dad, testing the waters, waiting for him to remind me that he actually already has kids and doesn't need an adopted daughter. I go to see him once a year, but I always felt like maybe he sees my need to see him as a dad to be annoying. Then a couple of weeks ago I asked him if he was coming up for Christmas, and he said he couldn't. But then he said, "I love you, my daughter." Thank you for providing a nice counterexample for your dad. I'm glad you realize at the very least it wasn't your fault. Whatever issues he had were his alone, and if it hadn't been you, he would have vented that on someone else. I'm glad that you found your uncle as an ersatz better father figure. And just to warn everyone, there are some stories of familial mistreatment that get quite sad and dark here, so brace yourselves. For some reason or another, my mother hated me. As a little girl, I could never understand why she treated me so much worse than my 3 other siblings, and I'd often go up to my grandmother and ask her, "Why doesn't my mama love me?" She could never give me a straight answer and would tell me, "Your mama loves you in the only way she knows how." That answer confused me because my mum loved my siblings just fine. And as a disclaimer, her love was toxic as frick, and she did a different kind of damage to them. Now, when I say that my mother treated me badly, it started out with her picking fights with me. She'd constantly nitpick at everything I did, chastising me, and at the end of the day punishing me harshly for something that could have been a gentle scolding. When I got older, she started cussing at me and calling me names. She'd often ignore me for days on end, and when she'd talk to me, it would be to make me the butt end of a bad joke, or to tell me that she hated me. Yes, my mother looked me dead in the eyes and told me she hated me. Disclaimer number 2, she was an addict and an alcoholic, and she loved to claim all of the emotional stuff she put me through as a child were the effects of the things she was taking, and that it wasn't even that bad. So yeah, this relationship really began to tear at me after a while. All sorts of terrible things she did to me growing up, the terrible things she said and how she ignored me constantly, all of it was very different than how she treated my other 3 siblings. She was very close with one of my brothers and my sister. She'd spend time with them constantly, take them anywhere, buy them anything that they wanted, and it made me resent them. My sister would sometimes rub it in my face that Mum loved her more. It was my sister's way of having power over me, and it was one of those things that made my rage bubble over onto innocent people. I just wanted to be loved and accepted. I wanted to be cared for and cherished as a child should be. And when I didn't get that, I plotted on how I was going to get her love and affection. In my screwed-up mind, I thought that if I got rid of my older brother and younger sister, I would be one of the only people left for her to love. So I planned on that. How screwed up is that, huh? It wasn't just some thought that passed through my head, it was a constant idea. A plan that I was putting into place to get rid of my brother so that I could make room in my mother's heart for me. I feel ashamed writing it out. It was a dark time in my life, and I was also incredibly mentally ill. So one day, while my mother was out dealing with my brother and my sister was sleeping, I took the rest of her pills. My sister was super afraid of becoming addicted to meds after watching what my mother was going through, so there were a ton left, and I waited for my brother to come back. When I heard him come back in, his room was next to mine, I went into the kitchen and I made him a glass of juice. Earlier in the day, I'd crushed up the pills into a powder, and I mixed them into the juice. I went up to his room, knocked on the door, and offered him the cocktail of various prescription meds. He took the juice, and right before he was about to drink it, I'd thought, wait, how could I do this to my own brother? And I snatched the drink back, and it spilled all over the carpet. He was really mad, but at least he was alive. I never tried doing anything like that again. It felt so sick, wrong, evil. I mean, what kind of person thinks about doing that? Besides, my brother dying wouldn't make my mother love me anymore. She'd have just resented me for living instead of him. So, that's the sad, sick story of the worst thing I almost did. Probably still the worst thing I'll ever do. I didn't actually carry through with it, obviously, and I guess everyone lived happily ever after. My brother got clean and now has a happy family. I'm in college. My sister's leg healed up nicely, and my mum left us all after a while. But that's a story for another time. I finally decided to fight back against my bad parents. I only had to do it once to stop the physical stuff as well. The psychological stuff kept up, though. I didn't grow up with the best family. There was a long period of time where there was constant fighting, and things often went too far. I didn't feel safe in many different ways. It all culminated at a point when I was older, disowned, and was about to get kicked out. But my vindictive, defensive actions in the past made my mother know that kicking me out wasn't a good idea. I know the only reason I could have a roof over my head was because my mum isn't a citizen, and she knew I would have reported her for the crime of child mistreatment, which did happen, which would have put her residency in jeopardy. So I guess I had to threaten to burn the village in order to feel the warmth of safety. A lot of people are assuming my mother's illegal, but she's not. I'm not exactly sure the mechanism through which she can stay in the United States, but she married my dad, who's American, and they got divorced. She can live and work here, but she doesn't have the full protection of the government like me. When I was a teacher living in rural Alabama, I did not get along with my stepmother. She went out of her way to be as mean as she could to me. Once, when she left the house, she took the mouse for the family computer with her, so I couldn't use it while she was gone. Well, I did her one better by taking the cord from the back and then locking myself in my bedroom until she got home. She uses my little baby stepsister against me and tells her to tell me that she has a present for me. As soon as I unlocked the door, my stepmother yanks it out of my hand and starts screaming at me about why the computer won't work. Well, let me tell you, on one side of me I had a steel pole lying against the wall, and on the other a simple glass of water. I briefly entertained the notion of hitting her in the face with the pole, and instead I just chucked the harmless water in her face. Whew, I'm quite sure I avoided jail that night. Well done on not letting your intrusive thoughts win, or at least not the worse ones. I'd say you're the better, stronger person for it. Also, that behavior of just taking the mouse, because God forbid you be allowed to do anything remotely entertaining. People who just want others to suffer for no reason. What's going on in their heads? I had a coworker at a non-commission-based retail job where they would repeatedly sabotage my sales so she could get a lot of credit apps and a high GSP. It's kind of a figure for your average sales per hour. She'd overhear my pitch for cards, which was required, and then lie to the customer so that they'd apply. I'd have to try and rectify what she said while she hovered over me. She did many other questionable things, and I reported her multiple times, as did my coworkers and customers, actually. Now, one time I got lucky, and an 18-year-old kid came in to buy the most expensive desktop that we have on display, $2.5 grand. My coworker saw me do this sale, but I needed a manager to approve a tiny discount. But my radio was dead. The coworker was watching me the entire time, so I asked if she'd call for the manager. She stone-cold ignored me. I go for the manager, she prints out paperwork on the computer and tries to sell it to the customer while I'm gone. When I return, she literally yells at me in front of the customer to give her the sale because she worked too. I ignored her and didn't give her the sale. When I reported this, as did the customer who was mortified, I was literally told by my boss to ignore when she does that. She's a middle child, so she does this kind of stuff. I was tired of the stupid lack of action, so I failed an HR complaint regarding her, and 5 of my managers for not addressing it. And they all got reamed for it. One of them's still in a management position, and the rest were eventually demoted or laid off. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I used to work in fast food, but I was the only person in the store that didn't smoke. Everyone else got to take a break to smoke, but since I didn't smoke, I wasn't allowed to. Eventually, I spoke to the owner about it and was rebuffed, so I went over their heads to the company board. The owner got his butt chewed out for rebuffing me, and I wound up getting a huge bonus on my next paycheck. But when they discovered that I'd reported them, I got fired immediately. Turns out they'd been violating company policy for food prep and storage, so I fired another report to corporate. The store got shut down for months, and my former boss got fined 6 figures. My brother is 10 years younger than me, and he's a teenager. I regularly drive him out to see his girlfriend, and I drive him to his classes as well. Recently, he's becoming very disrespectful and downright rude. He's only nice to me if I've made food or if he needs a ride, and in a way that really tees me off even more. The amount of times I've seriously considered pulling over and making him walk the last 10 miles home? Whew. My dad didn't seem to take any interest in my life since I was about 4. Then, when my mum left him and I told him I was going to leave, he then proceeded to do everything to get me to live with him. Buying me stuff, telling my mum wasn't a fit parent, trying to get custody in court. I decided to live with him in the end because I was too scared to start a new school midway through the year. He then dates this woman who is pretty much the catalyst in destroying their marriage, and he gets mad at me when I don't treat her like a mother. My mum is now trying to get custody, and I'd burn his house to the ground if it meant she'd win. Just go and live with her. Refuse to go back. Your dad will have to go through the system to get you back. I mean, true, the cops might take you back to him once or maybe even twice. But ultimately, if you're stubborn enough, the cops will refuse to do your father's bidding and tell him to take it to court. Trust me on this. Just go to your mom now. Well, I would, but she doesn't have a house right now. She's living with her brother, and I also want to finish the school year. She should have full custody by June. Moved to a new town and started going to a new church when Dad got cancer. I went to church and told the pastor to try and get advice. The pastor announced this to the convocation, and also told everyone that some lady's horse was sick. I watched the entire convocation console this lady about her sick horse. The convocation was in tears about the sick horse while my dad was dying. Nobody said a word to my family. I haven't been to church since. Ugh, that's awful. I'm from the UK, so many of us aren't brought up in any religion. But my friend started going to our local church, and she just received news that her boss's new baby, who was only a few days old, had unexpectedly passed away. Totally distraught, she went to the church and she had a word with the vicar, asking if the baby could be mentioned in the "Please Pray For" section of the service. She was appalled when the first question asked was the baby Christian? As if any other baby would not be worth mentioning in the service. And when a clearly upset parishioner needed the support of the church at that time, she never went back to church. Oh man, middle school for me. I got really badly bullied at school, both mentally and physically. I wasn't getting any support at home, or that's what it felt like. I wasn't in a good place. I had so many negative thoughts and plans of how to get my revenge. Thankfully, I never had access to any sort of weapon, or I would have become one of those great school tragedies of America. That's how bad and deep in depression I was in. I did end up in a psych ward, and man, those places are terrible. I didn't get any help, but I only learned to bottle up my crap more. I can absolutely attest to being around people who are love-starved and then subsequently self-sabotaging or otherwise destructive. In a softer sense, if I felt rejected, I felt peace in sort of burning bridges to find myself. My wife was senior staff for a local science fiction convention. Not only was she an unpaid volunteer, she had to take a vacation day off work and pay for her hotel room and parking. On the morning that the convention started, she was setting up the first of the 3 rooms she was responsible for. Manual labor, moving tables, setting up shelves and loading them with stuff, and then somebody came in, took her ID badge off her desk and brought it to the convention's Lost and Found. The convention Lost and Found lady told my wife that lost badges have a $5 fee to get them back. My wife looked at the badge, looked at the lady, and said, "You know what? Keep it. I'm going home. Have a nice convention." She was about 25 feet down the hall when the Lost and Found lady caught up to her and returned her badge. Wow, it's like they were trying to burn down their own village at that point. More like setting up a nuke in their own village. The lady was working for free and you have the nerve to make her pay for something to do her job? Honestly, good power move from her. I don't know if it quite typifies fully burning the village down, but they definitely walked up to the town hall with a lit torch, raised their eyebrows suggestively, and gave everyone a sound idea of what would go wrong if they weren't properly respected. I love it. Whenever I'm in a meeting and my suggestions are getting constantly ignored and I'm getting interrupted and talked over, I get the weirdest urge to prove I still exist by jumping on the table and busting out the Queen of the Night aria. It's only really an issue because of a few specific coworkers who resort to just yelling if confronted politely. Their managers have now been made aware of this. When I'd been bullied constantly in 7th grade by 3 different kids or groups of kids, and the school showed so little interest in helping me, I was physically bullied, verbally mocked, humiliated in front of other kids, and not an eye was batted. When I finally took my mum's advice to make a scene the next time someone started throwing things at me, I did it. We were outside that day for PE, and while we were all sitting in lines at the start of class, a kid in the next line to me started throwing pebbles at me. I ignored it for a moment, then when he kept going, I yelled at him to stop. I didn't care that people were staring. I wanted them to. I wanted them to see that this average-height, able-bodied boy was throwing things at me, a very small, disabled girl. The teacher came over and asked what happened. The kid told him they were only pebbles, he wasn't hurting me. The teacher agreed with him and told me if I ever disrupted his class like that again, I was getting detention. I don't know what it is about some teachers, but the second they get put in charge of more than one child, they become absolutely blind to any kind of bullying. And if it gets pointed out to them, they think that that particular incident exists in a vacuum and couldn't possibly be a sign of anything worse. I was 11 years old and having some pretty dark thoughts because I felt so incredibly powerless. That teacher only solidified that feeling. And that's why I tried to take a bat to school, to bust some kneecaps. Thankfully, my mom caught me and realized how bad it was and got me out. But not before bringing down hell on those teachers. She even made the principal freak out. Despite how angry I was, for some reason I never even thought about using my dad's weapons, and I'll always be thankful for that. Deep down, I think it was because I really didn't want to hurt anyone, I just wanted them to leave me alone. Dumped at the doorstep of a youth shelter after my mum was hospitalized and my dad was in prison. I wasn't a super bright teenager, but I had enough sense to spend my last $20 on pepper spray and padlocks for my stuff. Predictably, people's stuff went missing all the time. I could write an essay on the issues in the public welfare system, ranging from the macro level, lack of funding, to the micro level, incompetent or burnt-out staff. There was violence, substance use, and creepy, dodgy characters in crisis accommodation, but what bothers me 10 years later is the sheer stupidity of some of the adults who are meant to guide at-risk teenagers. I'd ask my social worker questions like, "Are there places which can help me with food this week?" Or, "How do I write a resume?" And that social worker would vaguely shrug and offer relaxation techniques and mindfulness strategies. Look, 3 people got arrested at this shelter last week. No amount of relaxation techniques are going to calm me down. I'm guilty of doing stupid and irresponsible things as a teenager, but eventually I finished high school and then 3 university degrees. I actually work for the same system that I was and am disappointed in, and there are so many practical resources available. They're underutilized because staff don't even know they're out there. If I just had a single adult to help me with the most simple tasks as a kid, it would have been so much easier. When you're a kid, you just don't know how university loan applications, taxes, budgeting and stuff work. Or at least I didn't. And everybody assumes that you do because they do. Like, I had no idea that in my country, the Department of Housing can pay for your rental bond. I stayed in a homeless shelter for an extra 1 to 2 months to save up $900 to pay for the bond of a crappy apartment. Extra months of broken sleep, men trying to pick the lock on my door, residents hyped up on ice. Last year there was a 16-year-old girl on the train having a meltdown and making a big scene. She was clearly drunk, and people were just avoiding her. She started screaming that she missed her period and does anybody want to pay for her termination. She phrased it as a joke or a way to get money, which I didn't give, but she repeated the joke enough times that I wondered if it was true. We got to talking and I referred her to social services, downloaded a list of resources in her catchment area, and saved links and forms on her phone about how to arrange her own healthcare cards since she's over 15, so that she can visit a bulk billing GP on her own and get tested. In my country, the pee test from a pharmacy is about $15, but a pregnancy blood test ordered by your GP is free. We discussed different options that her GP might outline and other things that might be helpful. I know as well as anyone else that it's not always that straightforward, especially with 30 patients in your caseload and juggling them with a million other priorities. But in the biopsychosocial framework of health, where biological, psychological, and social factors are proposed to impact physical and mental health, we severely underestimate the impact of social circumstances. We let these kids down all the time, and it's preventable. What's the most hilariously useless magic item you've ever had in Dungeons & Dragons? In my last campaign, my players got a hammer that shoots confetti and makes a party blower sound on crits. A dramatic moment happened where he had to put his pet owlbear down, as it was morphing into a monstrosity because of the big bad evil guy. Because the creature was on the ground morphing, he auto-crit. The beast lies there, writhing in pain, trying to hold on to its own self for as long as possible. You lift your hammer solemnly into the air, feeling the weight of not only the weapon, but the situation. As you bring it down, you feel flesh give as the skull has been pulverized from the transformation. The sound of teeth clacks against the ground, echoing in the room around you. The party looks at the ground, and a moment of silence consumes you all. So I'm doing my second video on Dungeons & Dragons stories in 2 weeks, don't hate. And yes, every time the chance to do this comes up, I'm going to leap at it like the hyper-obsessed nerd that I am. The +3 sword of Edward Tumbleton slaying. Edward Tumbleton was a tailor in a nearby city. They discovered a sword that was very effective at killing him. Just him. Neither the party nor any other person on the planet had any reason to kill the guy. The party ended up killing him by blowing up his shop with a fireball. The sword was never used. Poor Edward Tumbleton. I think at some point he got on the bad side of an artificer who told him, "I have a sword with your name on it," and it turned out to be true. Gave my party a sash of swimming, see retextured aquatic cummerbund. They put it on the donkey pulling their wagon and promptly forgot about it. I haven't though. 2 years later, I haven't. Haha, still waiting on the moment that the donkey will be the only one to survive the flood. The donkey is going to get sold or killed, and they won't remember the sash of swimming. That's what my party would do. The mug of pea warm chongo. Turn any liquid that enters its internal volume into, you guessed it, warm chongo, the temperature of fresh pee-pee. They threw it into the sea, and yes, while it would eventually produce an infinite amount of PWC, it didn't produce it faster than the various flora and fauna of the sea could consume it as current carried it away. The toils of all that be. Help not the primal fault. Rivers flow into the sea, yet still the sea is salt. I used to love making magical items that were off the wall. I felt like the game's items didn't reflect the silly stuff someone would make if they had the time and manic attention to detail. There's a devil called Chiton. It's chain-wrapped, chain-swinging, freaky, pain-loving Hellraiser type. My party fought one in a dungeon. He's wearing a unique amulet that makes chain. You place a piece of chain on the surface and the amulet starts slowly, magically generating a chain of the same dimensions. It only makes 10 feet a day, but over time you could make a few gold selling mundane chain. I just thought it was thematic and interesting. The party left the dungeon, went to town, found a smith, and poured their entire life savings into making 2 links of solid gold chain that would make Flava Flav weep. And I wept. What a fool I was. Reminds me of when my DM, tired of us breaking down doors, introduced adamantine doors on a massive castle, but he let us lift them off the hinges. We got so rich we decided to abandon the campaign. I gave one of my players a delicious magical sandwich that regenerated itself each day as long as you didn't eat the crust. It didn't offer any benefit when you ate it, it was just an infinite sandwich. That sandwich became a character in and of itself. The amount of time that was spent talking about the sandwich, its contents, the flavor, etc. was crazy. Every player described how their character would ogle the sandwich whenever it was brought out. That character is gone now, but she kept that sandwich right up until retirement. She spends her time in Candlekeep Library, devouring knowledge and also the sandwich. Wait, as long as you don't eat the crust, what if you cut it in half and separate the two halves? Would each half generate a whole sandwich as long as there are no bites taken out of it? It's the deep philosophical questions like this that keep me coming back to Reddit. Yeah, there are any number of minor items in D&D that are capable of changing the course of human or humanoid development when you think about their broader implications, if they were used to their best effect instead of just by a random bunch of idiot heroes. Fun stuff. Ring of fire detection. Range, touch. I had a merchant selling some knickknacks, and one of them was a ring of fire identification. If you pointed it at something, it would declare in a loud, clear voice, "Fire," or "Not fire." Obviously useful when facing illusory flames, but for some reason the party didn't spring for it. A fire distinguisher? A rope that couldn't be tied, not even for a second. They were facing a dragon who loved puzzles and eating non-dragons. They gave him the rope and made the deal that if the dragon couldn't make a knot within an hour, then the dragon would need to let them pass through. Our party's DM gave us a magical, mysterious bag. When we opened it, we pulled out a turtle. We reach in again, thinking there must be something else to this bag. We pull out a rabbit. Still thinking that there must be something else, something more meaningful to this item, we reach in again and pull out a 9-foot-tall deer. It really was just a backpack that lets you pull out random animals. My bard proceeds to use Speak with Animals, then charms the deer to let us ride him. We named him Preston, and he's been our ridiculously massive means of transportation ever since. The Rod of Irony was a fishing rod that you could only find by fishing it up. Using it only fished up more rods of irony, we used them for firewood. I'd become a fishing rod salesman. They found a wand that creates a random and unique lock that incorporates itself into the substance it's used on, so it might make a suspicious recess in a stone wall or a brass-plated keyhole on a wooden door. If probed with lockpicks, you would encounter moving tumblers or some other appropriate but unique locking mechanism. It didn't magically create a compartment, it just made a lock. Even if you used it on a desk drawer, it never made a latch or bolt. So the drawer would open perfectly fine while having a useless metal cylinder with tumblers that weren't connected to anything. If you successfully picked the lock, it always felt like a real lock despite lacking the physical pieces, it would make a soft chiming noise and the lock would evaporate. The wand was a training tool used by a famous locksmith to challenge himself and his students. It had no practical application at all outside of that profession. It ended up being used by the druid, who had ranks in magical device, don't ask, to constantly mess with the rogue. The druid would take every opportunity to wild shape into a small critter good for scouting, and then place fake locks anywhere the rogue might conceivably try to use the search skill. The rogue's increasing paranoia whenever he found a lock, and his overblown promises of vengeance every time a random hole in a floorboard wasted a minute of his time and chimed at him, was a pretty good gag. It turned a little sour when the druid made an extra lock on an honest-to-goodness treasure chest. The rogue rolled a natural 20 to pick the first lock and got a chiming noise. Then he rolled a 3 and triggered an energy-draining trap that permanently lost him 5 HP. After that, the rogue stole every wand the druid had in the middle of the night and threw them all into a bottomless pit in the Underdark. I had a magical rod of rubber duck. Gave it to the party as a joke item because they kept asking for weird crap. Not one of them chose to identify it. It was an artifact-level rubber duck. Once it was part of your inventory, it would never leave it unless it wanted to. It had wisdom and intelligence of 28, sentience, and it could be attuned. It was actually a great old one that could grant anyone a wish spell with 100% accuracy at the cost of 2 of the caster's levels. Nobody learned that it was probably the most powerful item in the game. And what is the function of a rubber duck? In the first campaign I played, the party began their journey by finding an orc woman in a tavern whose baby was stolen, and what she found in its place was a knife with a weird symbol on the handle. She sent us with the knife in search of the baby. We spent hours and hours and session after session never using the knife in combat. We then found out that the knife would turn anyone it cut into a lizard. My character ate peanut butter off that knife more than once before finding this out. It may just be me, but that item sounds far from useless. Facing a beholder? Slice? Now you're a gecko. Unstoppable vampire lord? Nope, it's a chameleon now. There's a reason polymorph is a popular spell for getting rid of powerful enemies while you wipe up their minions. My party has been carrying around a wand of disguised self they found in a magic store bargain bin for over a year and haven't used it yet. Except that's not actually what it is, hence why it was in the bargain bin. It's actually a wand of this guy's elf, which once a day can summon an incorporeal elven servant to carry out a simple task for you. I was so happy with myself for coming up with that one, and so sad they never even tried to use it, so the pun goes unheard forever. My infamous Horn of Resounding Quacks was a hit, summoned any duck within a half-mile radius of the person using it. The party never went hungry after that. For clarification, it was indeed to call any and all ducks within the half-mile radius, but it wasn't a matter of instant teleportation. The ducks have to travel, but do so willingly, answering the call of the horn. Poor ducks. If you're an evil DM, you can get them used to it, so they never bring food anymore, and then they put them in a duckless place. Have fun starving, boys. Depends on how you read it. Summon as in any duck within a half-mile is summoned to you, there need to be ducks, or summon. Within a half-mile radius around you, a duck is randomly summoned. If there were no ducks before, there is one now. It might be out of your sight, quacking, or standing behind some rocks a quarter mile away, but it's there nonetheless. Congratulations! The ethereal plane, the seventh layer of hell, and the deadly ruins of the great archwizard Asgordon are now infested with ducks, because your gosh damn bard kept blowing the horn every 3 seconds. I could see this. Some evil demigod lording over his demon minions, sneering as fire and smoke swirl around him, and then a duck appears on his lap. Then another on top of his throne. Suddenly, there's a dozen ducks all quacking about, then hundreds. This is actually an incredibly powerful magic horn. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I gave my players an alchemy jug. They had it for most of the campaign, and mostly forgot about it apart from the odd joke. But when building to the end, they used it to torture my main villain. They'd captured him. To find out what it was and how to stop him, they used the jug to pour mayonnaise down his throat until he agreed to talk. That gave them advantage on the intimidation check they had to carry out, which they succeeded on. So mayonnaise is an instrument of torture. In my 3rd edition early days, my friend's older brother was DMing a game for my friends, my sister, and me. One of the items we got rolled on the random table was a gust of wind fan. It's exactly what it sounds like. Wave it, creates a powerful enough gust of wind to propel a boat and possibly rips itself to tatters. Threw it in the pack and forgot about it. A few sessions later, we're defending a town from waves of invaders. The final boss is a Cyclops or an Etin or something. Big bruiser, we see it approaching, with enough time to prepare for its arrival. My sister asks us to use all of our healing potions and then give her the glass vials, which we do. Then she turns to the DM and calmly explains how she takes the vials with her up a guard tower. She smashes and grinds them up, waits for an opportune time, then uses the fan to blow a gust of powdered glass particles into the Etin's eyes. The look on this man's face, a cross between, "Holy crap, that's awesome. I'm so happy a story like this is in my campaign world now," and "Frick, this boss was supposed to be difficult." In a game I'm currently in, our DM gave us a flask of endless water. It can produce water in a trickle, a flood, or a deluge that shoots 30 gallons of water in one turn. Our cleric has just fallen from a bridge over a chasm, and through clever bullcrapping, our sorcerer has managed to catch the falling cleric with a web spell. As we're all racking our brains to figure out a way to save them, our cleric pulls out the flask and uses the water cannon mode to propel herself back onto the bridge, using the web strands as a fulcrum. This sounds like what happens when you play D&D with engineers. I'm not sure me or any of my players would have ever thought about using it in that capacity. More water-based shenanigans follow. I had to literally ban the 3.5 spell Create Water because my entire party rolled classes that could learn it. The default is Cleric or Druid, but there's books that award it to arcane casters as well, and solved everything with the stupid cantrip. It would blow your mind how many puzzles, traps, combat encounters, and social situations can be solved by liberal application of magic water. Someone refuses to talk? Waterboard them. Pressure plates might be down this hallway? Set them off from distance with a flood. There's a locked anything. Break it by dropping water from a height. Ambushed, turn the road to mud and run away. Setting an ambush, turn the road to mud and wait. Starving, you can survive for 10 days on just water. Need to escape from a conversation, a pipe bursts, and the building floods. The list goes on. Turns out physicists and engineers can turn a cantrip into the power equivalent of a 9th level spell, given enough thought. I have an idea for my next character now. Your party and DM do have to be on board for this to work. We would literally spend half of a 6-hour session doing math and digging through the books in order to make this kind of thing happen. We found it fun. Most tables likely would not find it fun. We ended up with Excel sheets for things like newtons of force in terms of D, X, and air expenditure by race in terms of volume per hour, accounting for increased and decreased size categories. They did all of this to justify plans like shrinking themselves down, jumping in an extra-dimensional hole with fixed dimensions, and mailing themselves into a building. Yes, there was an easier way. No, it wasn't as much fun. The ban was fairly well agreed on eventually. The cantrip shenanigans were amusing for a few weeks, but they ultimately got tired of already having the solution to every encounter, and we agreed to limit its use out of combat, non-encounter scenarios. You want to create a slip and slide to navigate a wizard's tower? No. Once my party got a huge, beautiful magic sword which was improperly identified as a sword of ogre slaying. Instead, it was a cursed sword of ogre saying. Whoever wielded it would only be able to yell "Ogre!" at things. Several adventures later, they were attempting to catch a thief who was evading them. They came up with the brilliant idea of setting the sword as bait and just going about their business. Sure enough, sometime later they heard "Ogre! Ogre! Ogre!" ring out through the town, and they caught him without consequence. Reminds me of the Ring of Hunan influence from volume 3 or 4 of the Encyclopedia Magica from 2nd edition AD&D. Whenever attempted to be used, it caused a painful burning sensation in the user's mouth that could only be removed by consuming 1d4 plates of rice. The Ring of Hunan influence. This jade ring is decorated with oriental characters including Fu Manchu and Charlie Chan. It affects all food eaten by the wearer. There is no noticeable change in taste, but 1 round after being eaten, the food begins to burn for 1d4 HP damage per round. Water only makes the burning worse. Plus 1 HP to the damage for 1 round. Only eating 1d6 plates of rice will ease the pain. However, no matter how much food is consumed, the wearer still feels hungry an hour later. For anyone who doesn't know, Hunan is a Chinese province known for their hot and spicy food, which I assume this is a reference to. Not while I was DMing, but my favorite useless magic items to this day are the Boots of Quickstep. Once per turn, you may click your heels as an action, to gain an action. It resulted in my character beginning each of his turn clicking his heels. It was marvelous. Once had my party find a magic spoon. It emitted a terrible aura of dark illusion magic, and merely holding it filled players with a sense of dread from its sheer chaotic energy. Its in-game abilities? It worked like a fork instead of a spoon. The arcane spork of +5 anxiety? Let it be known that the narrator is cackling maniacally and writing down magic item ideas while writing this script. A modified version of the 5e wind fan that only works once a day and immediately looks tattered after use, so you can never use it multiple times, but it only works once every 24 hours. Now, it sounds like a not bad magical item, but the only times it's ever been used is to show people what it does. So an NPC says, "Hey, what's this fan do?" The player grins, "I'll show you." Useless gust of wind noises. It happened 5 times and then it got sold off to the underground scrapper they were working for. Was playing a campaign on a tropical island type of place and an enemy knocked my weapon off a cliff, so I used a coconut as an improvised weapon, crit with that thing 4 times in a row, and decided to keep it for getting the final blow on people. Was a barbarian, and the DM liked that the coconut was killing things so much he had me keep track of the kills, and eventually I had a 3+ coconut that on a crit would ricochet until it didn't kill something. So basically he gave me a coconut of great potential. A few odds and ends, a can of dehydrated water, just an empty can, a wand of kindling, just a stick to burn, a scroll of raise dead that makes a dead body float 6 inches off the ground, a ring of invisibility that turns only the ring invisible on use. One of my one-shot campaigns had all players at 8th level, so I wanted to give them magical items, but not anything too OP. So one of my monk players wanted a decanter of endless water, so I changed it to a homebrew version where it didn't do the stream, fountain or geyser things, but instead it would pour endless alcoholic beverages. He could make the decanter fill with mojitos, or margaritas, or a Heineken, whatever, but only to get drunk. I thought it was harmless and fine, until I realized he'd selected the way of the drunken master and got drunk on command anywhere and everywhere. It was quite fun. I'm writing a new one-shot, and I might take some ideas from this post too. A DM once gave our party a mortar and pestle that let us grind out spices in fairly large quantities. We were supposed to use it as a hook to get involved with an army. It would have let the cooks keep the soldiers happy and put us in good graces of a local lord. Instead, we wound up completely abandoning that questline, setting up a spice shop, and went into business. It was supposed to be a one-off adventure, but we had a great DM and it turned into the best long-term campaign I've ever played in. It had a court intrigue, assassination attempts, war, curses, everything you could want. It ended when we all went our separate ways at the end of high school, with one of the business partners, Human, dying of old age, another, Elvin, selling his shares of the business to the dead one's heirs to retire, and my gnome faking his own death and leaving town to avoid a jealous husband, literally riding off into the sunset on a flying merchant ship. Man, you know how much spices cost once upon a time? More than their weight in gold. Saffron is still worth more than its weight in gold now. A quill of penmanship and literacy allowed any creature to write their thoughts down in perfectly legible common. A rogue in the party was obsessed with capturing different creatures and monsters to learn their thoughts, only to find that most animals just wrote onomatopoeia versions of normal animal sounds, like roar or quack. The party was sick of it and in a later adventure agreed to trade off the quill to a half-orc bodyguard in exchange for information to ambush one of the campaign's villains. The half-orc would become a Thomas Paine-like thought leader, and his first 2 books were dedicated to the party. I got a corncob pipe that made bubbles. Seriously, that's just it. Just bubbles. They didn't put people to sleep, they didn't explode under flames, nothing. Maybe it would make someone's eyes burn if they rubbed it in. We were assaulting a town and I was part of the crew taking the gatehouse. We barred the windows and doors and I put the pipe under the edge of the door and blew it like I was inflating my own life raft in the ocean. Soon, bubbles were pouring out at the seams and the guards inside were panicking hardcore. One of them tripped on something and hurt himself on his own weapon. Once we opened the door, they came stumbling out and we cut them down while they were disoriented and distracted. Shortly thereafter, I traded the stupid pipe for various types of arrows at a Fletcher. I had that damn pipe for a long time and only used it once. We were playing through a pre-made campaign. At one point, the players retrieved a magical artifact, which turned out to be an orb of control dragons. It does exactly what you'd expect. In theory, it could have been very useful, except no dragons were showing up in the campaign, so it was basically useless. It did, however, lead to a running gag where our most paranoid player kept attempting to control dragon random NPCs to see if they were secretly dragons in disguise. Belt of teleportation that only transported the belt and the pants of the wearer to an unoccupied location within 60 feet of the user. I put it in as a gag, but the players started using it to startle opponents by teleporting pants just above them. The shenanigans increased when they discovered the belt also teleported whatever was in the pants' pockets. My groups have a tradition of gifting players useless magic items with a birthday theme on their in-real-life birthday. 2 of the favorites that I bestowed so far include a pair of boots that dropped streamers everywhere he walked and a ring that turned the wearer's poop into chocolate cake, which could be eaten to regain 1 hit point. Why did you name this ring of healing poop cake? The Chocolate Fudge Maker. My DM gave my character a glove that when the word bravo is said, emits the sound of applause. My friend's character used it intentionally to blow our cover infiltrating an enemy stronghold because he wanted to fight something. Our GM gave us an item which was the head of an ancient goblin king. This severed head had the power to give good advice to us, but it was completely unrelated to the question. What should we do to kill the dragon? Remember to wash your hands after using the bathroom. How do parents of gold diggers feel about their kids' relationships? I'm an older brother. I finished school, got a job, got married, bought a house, and had kids. My parents are kind of average about me. They're proud of my family, but feel I didn't reach my earning potential. We got some inheritance from my grandmother, and I used it to modernize my house and buy a car. My sister finished school, got a job, started screwing her boss, moved into his house, got a promotion, splashed half of her inheritance on holidays and clothes, and the other half on a sports car, because she doesn't need a mortgage deposit now that she has a boyfriend with his own flat. My dad literally called me to tell me how proud he was of her buying a sports car all on her own. It would have been hilarious if it didn't highlight my parents' messed up values and complete blindness to their daughter's dependency on her butthole boss/boyfriend. I haven't seen the guy for a few years, but an old friend of mine started out as a gold digger with his girlfriend. He started dating her 4 years ago because he found out that she was rich. The dude came from a broken home with some really messed up parents. He also had ADHD as well as a couple of other learning disabilities. Quit high school in grade 11, but started dating her shortly before that. Her dad was filthy frickin' rich, as he had a lot to do with the mines in the area. A CEO in a huge mining town. He was seemingly mooching at first, didn't go to work, didn't do anything but drink and do substances with his girlfriend. More than once I heard that the father was going to kick him out, but was persuaded by his little girl not to. He eventually falls for the girl and not for the money and decides to take it upon himself to change. Out of nowhere, he says, "I want a job, I don't care what it is," to the girl's dad, and her dad puts him to work. Now, when I knew him, he was famous for his work ethic in intensive labor jobs. Dude was like the freaking Energizer Bunny. He worked his butt off, earned his promotions, and went back and finished high school, completed 2 trades, and the 2 of them bought a house together. To my knowledge, he rarely drinks and hasn't touched substances since he started working. I was pretty surprised because when I went to school with him, he caused nothing but trouble. Cousin is a gold digger. She was actually taught to be one by her mother, who married a very hardworking and self-made successful man, but wasn't quite up to her own dreams. When my cousin was in college, she needed a new car, so she went to the dealership, flirted with the salesman, banged him for a week, and got a loaded new car at his own inside cost, then dumped him the next day. That was pretty par for the course. Car salesman to himself? Yep, still got it. And ladies and gentlemen, we're back on topics that make the narrator despair at the state of humanity. Don't be like this woman. Other way round for me, I'm a 21-year-old girl and my father is a gold digger. He's on his 3rd wife, who's a rich, former antiques dealer. They go on annual 6 to 10 month holidays in various continents, staying in 5-star hotels the whole time. They live in a penthouse overlooking Sydney Harbour, including the Harbour Bridge and Opera House. All of my brothers work constantly for everything they have. I'm a uni student who works 6 to 10 shifts a week at a pub, and I live in a semi with my mum, with a mortgage that's like twice as much as the bloody house is worth. Honestly though, I'm glad he found a rich wife. Means I won't have to take care of him when he's dying. My aunt and uncle were cash flow rich. Tons of cash, spent it all, no savings. So they looked really rich, but literally didn't have a penny. Their irresponsible behavior rubbed off on their 2 daughters. Got ridiculous degrees and then glamour jobs that didn't pay. Daddy wrote them a check every month to cover the difference. They dated male models who were as broke as they were. Then one day, Mummy and Daddy had to file for bankruptcy and the daughters were informed they were being cut off. For good. No problemo. They bought tiny bikinis and met 2 lawyers the next day, and each one married the lawyer they met. One lawyer was bald, the other fat. From male models to that. How does Mum feel about the daughters? Brags about how successful their husbands are at every chance and how they're living this fabulous lifestyle. One lawyer was bald and the other fat, from male models to that. Did you just bust out a freestyle? One of my college friends was always open about wanting to find a rich guy to take care of her. She signed up for a dating site focused on wealthy older men looking for young attractive women. About a month after signing up, she met a guy through the site and went on a few dates. She was 21 and he was in his mid-40s. This would have been about February of that year. In March, he bought her a new Mercedes, and by the end of April had leased a brand new condo in Toronto for her, so she could be closer to him. She moved into the condo on the 1st of May. By November, she announced she was pregnant and they got married in the following spring, while my friend was 7 to 8 months pregnant. The kid is almost 2 now, and they legitimately seem like a happy married couple. She loves not having to work and spends as much time as she can at her parents' also fairly wealthy cottage. And her husband was on the website looking for a trophy wife to spend his money on, so there's an understanding between them. But from day one, she had the opinion of, I'm attractive and have a forward fashion sense, and this is what I want in life, which she found and fulfilled. She still keeps up her appearance as a stay-at-home wife, and they're always out at fancy dinners. I respect the crap out of both of them for knowing what they wanted and being mature about it. Sounds like a win-win for everybody in this case. I've definitely known guys who are pretty open about wanting a trophy wife. It is. There are so many relationships like this in Greenwich. It's like there was a freaking factory somewhere putting them together. It worked so well for them. Wife and husband don't love each other per se, but she's pretty and agrees to stay pretty, and he's rich and agrees to stay rich. Boom. Baby-making city. I'm not a gold digger, but my Chinese mother keeps telling me about the rich Asian girls who move to Cali and tries to get me to hook up with one. I don't see myself being happy with someone I have nothing in common with, though. Funny, my Taiwanese mother keeps telling me to watch out for the gold-digging mainlanders that just want a passport and half my assets. Good friends of mine, a bit older than me, a brother and sister. Sister is a gold digger for sure. She's on her 4th marriage to a millionaire. They came from humble beginnings. The dad owns his own business, but is very middle of the road, middle class. The parents help the brother out a lot with money, and the sister constantly talks crap about him because of it, considers him a leech on their parents. Of course, the brother resents the sister for never having worked a day in her life, but vacations in Europe once a month. Thought I would answer because it's an interesting dynamic to have witnessed. People are very harsh in their judgment of who they consider gold diggers. It feels quite ridiculous sometimes to be the older sister-in-law to a gold digger. I'm older than her by 10 years, yet she gives me life lessons on a regular basis. For example, when she feels like she hasn't had a good day, she calls and says, money doesn't buy happiness. Tease me the frick off, because she has no idea what it's like to have real problems, like getting ready to lose your home or worrying that you're going to have to feed your kids that day. She married a guy 15 years older so that she could sit on her butt and shop. She has a huge house and no responsibilities. I'm not a jealous person. I'm happy for her if she'd just stop talking bullcrap about how hard she has it when she knows very well that her brother and I aren't doing well financially. She's also a bragger, constantly throwing it in my face like, "Come and see my new car, isn't it awesome? We're going away for the weekend, too. Can you babysit? Look at the pictures of this exotic place we're going. I can't wait." And I'm sitting there like I haven't taken vacation since my honeymoon. She knows this. I don't really blame her though. She's completely unaware of anyone else other than herself. Really, she doesn't do it for meanness, she's just dense. Yeah, marrying someone for their wealth and ease of life might be okay if both sides are aware of it, but then choosing to whine about your rich person problems and giving life lessons to your less well-off friend is a real crapbag move. Don't forget your roots, people. It's a job that takes time to perfect. It's not like the old days when you just keep shoveling pay dirt into the trommel until you find a nice streak. Sadly, the bygone days of hitting glory hole after glory hole just don't happen anymore. Most companies go bankrupt the very first year, and if you don't adhere to the strict environmental regulations, you could be kicked off a site at a moment's notice. Honestly, I'd rather have my daughter just find a nice rich doctor and become a housewife, but that's not her style. She always played with her brother's Tonka trucks. The Yukon is in her blood. Her grandfather was a gold digger too. If you marry for the money, you're going to earn every penny. Not sure where I heard that saying, but I think it's great. My ex was a gold digger. He couldn't handle that I'm happy not being filthy rich. I'm comfortable, that's enough. He left for a rich girl and then left her for a richer girl and married her. He's already cheated. I dodged a bullet. Isn't it more like the bullet took a turn? I think it's at least somewhat likely that most parents of gold diggers never thought that much about their children's lives, ever. This makes sense. An ex of mine used to complain about her dad, a doctor who never had time for her. When I was dating her, I found out that her ex was 25 years older than us and had founded and sold a company for tens of millions of dollars. She currently is not working and lives at her family's beach house. This will probably get buried, but I'll post it anyway. I'm not the parent, but the child of a gold digger. My dad was educated exclusively at private schools and elite Ivy League education. He got his master's in finance by age 24. He's from a politically connected family and could be making millions on Wall Street. Instead, he took much lower-paying jobs in order to help raise me and my brother. My mum has her degree in art history. She dumped her previous fiancé and met my dad while celebrating that she'd dumped her old flame. They got married, and within 9 years they were divorced. I constantly heard them fight about how my father wouldn't give her some spending money. He repeatedly told her that if she'd like to spend money, that she had a degree that she could earn her own with. This was not acceptable to her, so they got divorced. Within 2 years, my mum was remarried to a doctor and quit the job she had since doctors' wives don't work. Within 3 months, the marriage fell apart. Throughout my upbringing, my mother constantly beat it into me and my brother's skull that you should always have the finest things, never settle. She would always make comments in private about how people didn't always look their finest. This was in spite of the fact that she refused to work a job that was beneath her. To my mum, how something makes her look is infinitely more important than anything else. Her new fiancé is awesome and he's the VP of a branch of banks. She spins this as, he's the VP of a bank. She would always brag about where her husbands, at the time, were educated. My brother works in business, and she spins this as, he's a consultant who has clients in Manhattan, Toronto, etc. I work at a bakery doing hourly-level tasks. She tells her friends, my youngest works as a baker making organic, high-end bagels. Despite earning into the six figures, she somehow never has money, yet just bought a new BMW. My mum is both a gold digger and a fricking snob. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I have a brother who tried to be a gold digger. He met a girl in the then AOL chat rooms. She lived in the next county. They got friendly and started to meet together on a friendly face-to-face basis. At one point, she invited him to her home where she lived with her parents. This is when my brother discovers the girl's family is rich. They lived in a giant mansion, lots of acreage, servants, and had a huge game room, complete with pinball machines, video game machines, a jukebox, etc. The girl's father, as it turned out, once owned a company that distributed classic TV shows for syndicated reruns on TV stations all across the country. I say once owned because he had it sold for the sum of $200 million back then, and the girl was an only child. Hence, she stood to inherit everything of her father's someday. My brother was excited, even knowing her only a few weeks, in spite of not being in love with this girl. Behind her back, he was talking marriage and living in the lap of luxury for the rest of his life. How he had made it if he played his cards right. Unfortunately for my brother, the girl was of a very liberal persuasion. She had no respect for herself, cheating on one boyfriend with another and another. Even more unfortunate for my brother, he wasn't able to get in on any of that action with the girl. She was sleeping with every other boy except for my brother. He couldn't get himself out of the friend zone. He was the only one who couldn't get himself out of the friend zone. On one occasion, one of the girl's boyfriends made an unannounced visit to this girl at her home. Her family naively and innocently cheerfully directed him upstairs where the girl was. He went upstairs to the girl's bedroom and walked in on her going down on some other guy, the both of them completely in the naughty. The boyfriend, in a rage, grabbed the stalker's guy, grabbed him out of the room, and tossed him down the stairs. The family was shocked to see this unclothed guy come tumbling down the stairs into the room with them. Anyway, over a few months' time, my brother and this girl drifted apart to the point where they never saw each other or conversed online again. He watched his dream of being rich fade into the sunset. I don't know where that girl is today or what happened to her. How is he her boyfriend, but was still in the friend zone? I'm quite amazed you've made that douche nozzle sound like the victim. Good job, that's a skill. Yeah, I don't get it. It sounded like he wasn't even dating her. He met her at a beauty salon and was interested in her type of purse. That should say something. He's happy that she has an ample backside and knows that she's dated others that are well known. I'm worried that she is spending his money on cosmetic surgery when she should be buying toys for their kids. I want them to get a prenup. It's something that he needs to have. He started out as a dishwasher, got promoted to janitorial, and then to fry cook. He worked his way to a Mercedes, but I'm afraid that he would just have traded her up for some other girl anyway. Yep, that seems like an arrangement that could very well end in tears for one or the other person sooner or later, but adding kids to the mix makes it a little sadder. There's an entire town called Wellesley, Massachusetts, and its neighbor, Weston, Massachusetts, where all couples are made of rich guys who marry gold diggers/trophy wives. If you have a chance to be there, it's hysterical to watch. So self-absorbed and so self-centered. I'm sure there are other places like that in the US, but that's the one I know. I have a family who lived there, and it's so true. My aunt, a doctor, married another doctor. She's the absolute minority there, and people simply cannot understand why she'd choose to have a career when she could just benefit from her husband's without doing any work. Mind-blowing. You know, I'd rather they leached off someone rich than me. The talentless bums. My boss is extremely wealthy and is constantly dating young girls who are obviously gold diggers. Not very attractive guy pushing 60 who refuses to date anyone over 35. We all at the office recognize it and think, to ourselves of course, that it's sad and borderline pathetic. However, he's happy with what he does and loves the attention, so we all just go with the flow. I think it's obnoxious and think very little of his girlfriends, but whatever, it's his life and his money, and if that's how he wants to spend it, he can be my guest. I'm sure I can comment on behalf of my mother. The one time I dated someone with a good job, $100K a year, she was thrilled I'd found the kind of person she had prayed and hoped for. Someone who could take care of me. She has the opinion that I'm a little too lofty and in over my head for the real world, despite having always had a practical plan for myself, studying hard to graduate high school early, putting myself through college, always working a full-time job, if not two, to keep myself funded. Only once has she helped me financially. $600 I never even asked for. But this guy must be 100% a good catch because he bought her a new toaster when hers broke and an expensive radio she wanted for Christmas. i.e. the trickle-down economy. What takes care of me will benefit her. Mutual friend to both parties. I went to high school with the boyfriend and know the girlfriend from a mutual friend. They start dating because she was a rebound for him and he was willing to take her crap. Guy proposes last year and she denies him because she thinks she can do better. I know her sister and that's what she told me. Fast forward a year when he got another job and is in the middle of buying his first house and is doing better, she all of a sudden wants a ring and her name on the mortgage. All our mutual friends think she's pulling a scumbag move because she definitely wasn't going to stay with him before. Apparently the mum is putting her up to this, and the boyfriend is not enjoying buying his first house because he realizes now what a succubus he's dating. My ex is, or was, a gold digger. When her mum told me that she didn't think I could afford her daughter, it teed me off, but then I realized what the mum was really trying to tell me. Rich guys who are smart keep a low profile and never reveal their money until they're sure that the woman is sincere and not gold digging. There was a reality show about princes from foreign countries who came to America looking for a wife. They pretended to be regular schmoes until the right girl came along. One guy from India lived in a palace, and I mean with a capital P. He had over 100 servants just to maintain the place. I didn't see the end of the show, but I understand the sentiment. With the way divorce courts in America work, a stupid rich guy who isn't careful is going to be writing a check with a lot of zeros in it. Brother of a guy who married a gold digger. I pretty much know what mum thinks about the mess, though. My brother is an MD, very highly regarded, extremely highly paid. He did the classic marry a nurse thing. She barely put up with our mother and I, his only family, while dating. Once married, she turned into a psycho B-word from hell towards us. She's made his life miserable, but they have kids together, so he stays with her. He's put her through a couple more degrees because she didn't want to do nursing anymore, but wanted to do something else. Of course, she doesn't actually bother to use the degrees for anything, so it's a total waste of money. She does nothing but sit around the house all day, doesn't take care of it, but they have a maid so the house isn't a wreck. My mother and I both feel really sad for him. We're hoping that once the kids get old enough, he'll dump her sorry butt. Also hoping the kids don't turn out to be train wrecks. The older one has some serious anxiety problems, probably from her mum being a constant screaming B-word, but at least she can get free psych meds, so she's got that going for her. Mum has set up trusts for the kids and put in clauses preventing the psycho B-word from ever having any form of control over them or benefiting from them. So the kids will also be able to pay for their psychiatric care when they're out on their own, even if everything else goes to heck. Not a gold digger, but my mum is. To give you an idea, my biological dad was a World War II vet, loaded out the wazoo, boats, houses, businesses, everything, who was married to another woman when I was conceived. I'm 27, and she's on her third husband right now. A sweet 92-year-old man who bought her 2 cars, a house that was $250,000, and pays her bills so she doesn't work. This includes the $800 a week treatments for her dog. My sister sugared for a while, which I suppose is a form of gold digging. Everyone found it gross, including me. Now that I finally understand no matter how hard I work, I'll never not be poor, I'm considering it myself. I don't have the stomach for it. It's not the screwing the old guys part. I actually don't have much reaction to that at all. It's that there's a whole lot about it basically play acting as what every horrible man on earth expects a woman to be, and I just can't fake that. It's gross for one thing, obviously, but it's actually a lot of work being that kind of woman when it doesn't come naturally to you. Sugar babies earn every penny of that money tolerating these stupid, annoying old men. I suspect I went to school with many gold diggers. I went to an expensive private high school, so I suspect my former classmates are used to a certain lifestyle. I have them on Facebook, and I've seen 5 of those girls marry much older gentlemen. I want to believe there's more to the relationship, but they're fairly attractive, and their husbands are much, much older. Their wedding pictures, however, are quite pretty. I used to be friends with this girl. She kind of had ugly duckling syndrome. She was cool to be friends with, but she just wasn't someone you'd want to date. She was really into sports and kind of one of the guys. About 6 months after high school, she turned 18. Then she had this great boyfriend. All of the girls talked about how awesome he was and how he had a pool at his house, had a couple of nice cars, etc. We all go to this party at this guy's house and we're hanging out around the pool, and this guy in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, comes out and starts talking to us. I thought it was her dad or something. She walks up to him and sticks his hand in the back of her bikini bottoms, and she playfully tries to pull away, but they make out. Pretty mind-blowing. Turns out this guy just retired from the Marines and was her dad's commanding officer. Next, all of her friends are hooking up with military retirees. I think him and her got married a couple of years later. My boyfriend's sister is 100% a gold digger and daddy's little girl. She married into a wealthy family at 25, divorced him, ka-ching, then married his best friend who was independently, and much more, wealthy. I guess she had to change her plans after her lucrative philosophy degree didn't work out. My niece married a guy she met at high school because his family was loaded. His dad died not too long ago and they inherited $272 million. I can't say I'm pro-gold digging, but damn. Who is that guy or girl that you work with? In my office, it's the "I took the liberty" guy. You come back from lunch and your desk is cleared of the project you had been working on. You run to the bathroom and find your freshly poured coffee replaced with your washed, empty mug. As you dare to say, "What the hell?" he comes around the corner of your cube. "I took the liberty of straightening up your work area," and gleefully moves on to ruin someone else's afternoon. This can also be called the Helperton. That's when you go into his office and take the liberty of turning every single thing upside down. Work with a woman who repeats, "Having fun yet?" almost every hour of the shift. Does she also say, "Another day in paradise," and TGIF, hump day? There is this one man in the office, I'll call him Tim. Tim is a very elderly and angry man, known for this woman's cardigan he wears every day, as well as his many heated conversations, of which the snippets are pure gold. Last week, out of the blue, he proclaims he was up to his knees in blood while on a phone call. Yesterday, he said he would rather be doing blow down the streets of New York. One of my favorites included, "Sometimes in life you're the chip, sometimes you're the dip. I love and fear Tim." Detox caseworker here. I work with that girl who talks about her failing marriage, how much she hates her kids, and how much she hates working where she works. She's a very odd person. One day she loves her husband and talks about how much of a god he is, yet she hates her marriage. She talks about what little SOBs her kids are, yet she wants another one, making it 6 children. Lazy as frick, and she's that girl at the yearly Christmas party where she's the only one that goes over her limit and starts spilling secrets people have told her. Not to anyone's surprise, she's gotten many of her coworkers to hate her guts upon walking in the door. Why do social services workplaces always hire the crazies? Does someone in HR say, "Oh yeah, you came to the interview with mismatched shoes and a transformer in your hair, you're caseworker material"? Trust me, I'm a caseworker, no one wants this job. It's hard as frick and emotionally taxing. We have insane turnover, leading to some questionable hires. For some reason, social workers are enshrined in my mind as being very level-headed, if bureaucratic and dull people. Maybe that's Hollywood influencing me. So there are nutters among them, I guess, judging by those last posts. My boss asked me what my Christmas plans were. I told him I'm Jewish. He, in all seriousness, asked me if I would be more comfortable in accounting. Do you work for Michael Scott? Is he Jewish? That sounds like something any number of funny Jewish guys I know would kill to deadpan. A salesman who occasionally comes through and hassles us. The first time he asked what I was working on, I didn't realize what he was up to. I thought he needed help with something, and of course, I'm glad to help. He keeps asking things like, "You're not busy. You don't have anything going on?" It seemed odd how many times he asked, but still, I'm thinking he wants help, is trying to be polite, and is worried he's interrupting me. I get started on what he asks, and he leaves. Next thing I know, my boss arrives asking why I have nothing to do. Thankfully, my boss is pretty cool, so nothing bad happened. The salesman is not our boss or even in our department, yet he occasionally comes through checking on us and asking things like, "Why does that job take 2 people? He's such a prick. If he was doing his job, he shouldn't have time to nitpick. He's trying to make himself look good by making everyone else look bad. Unfortunately, he will probably end up being middle management. Most bosses love suck-up snitches and don't realize the rat doesn't do their own job efficiently." There's a dude that watches videos of God knows what and screams along to them. I think he's watching wrestling or maybe boxing or something, because every now and again he'll just shout, "Oh, put him on a body bag!" Or, oh, queen, B! And start dusting off his hands loudly and laughing. It's fricking bizarre. The guy that I work with has only one eye and can drive a forklift better than I ever could with 2. Great guy, too. But how does he wink at cute girls while he's forklifting? Every single day, he comes in and spews some bullcrap. He's just invested another $175K in some property, he just had a genius moment on the way into work, and will now be able to solve the energy crisis. He's just met some famous smart person, like Elon Musk, who said he was the smartest person they'd ever met. This isn't occasionally, this is all the time. Literally every single day. You can't even talk with this guy. It's so irritating. He follows me everywhere, and you try to have some normal conversation and he just spews more bullcrap. I tried talking with him once and said, "Well, my car has this thing going on with it, I may need to take it to the shop." He replies with, "Oh, that reminds me, my boyfriend is having the Lamborghini dealer come over tonight. He's having a midlife crisis, but work just gave him another $2 million bonus because he's such an amazing architect." Frick this guy. Start actively perusing these conversations. Ask for him to expand on the details of the story to see how ridiculous they get. For instance, you could have asked him, "Oh, your boyfriend's an architect. Has he worked on anything I'd recognize?" To which you would likely get an outlandish answer, which you could make the person expand upon again. It's like a game. Oh, he always comes up short when we ask for proof. He kept going on once about his lake house at Lake Tawakoni, which he put up on an Airbnb. One of the other guys I worked with started bugging him for the link to look it up. He wanted a place to go to, with his wife on a weekend getaway. Crazy coworker comes back and says, "Oh, you couldn't afford it," and says the insurance on the boat rental alone is $3,500 a day. Still never came back with an address. We kept pushing him on it. "Oh, it's booked until October." This was back in the spring. We still haven't gotten an address on that house. One of the guests on Airbnb rented the house and a huge party with 100 plus people, and they broke sinks off the walls and burned the couch on the front lawn. His maid, who he hired to look over the place, called and told him about all the damages. She sent him photos, but when we asked to see them, "Oh, I don't have them on me." Really? Did she send them via UPS? How do you not have photos on you in this day and age? Anyway, we asked about them the next day. Oh, Kevin, his boyfriend, wouldn't let me show them to anyone, and miraculously insurance sent them $45K within 2 days for all the damage. Never seen insurance work that fast before. Someone found his boyfriend's resume online, but he's not an architect. Something similar to interior design, I forget the title, and he had done stuff like he designed the layout of some gas stations. You're going about it wrong. You don't want proof of the story, you want the most outlandish, impossible story you can pull from the guy. This guy gets it. I had a coworker snowboard down a mountain in front of an avalanche after he was launched from a helicopter. That's what I get for trying the bunny slope. Frick you, CB. I put my boogers on the adjustment levers of your chair and then frick up your settings when you're in the bathroom. I'm a waiter, and one of my coworkers is an Italian old man that's so close to retirement that he doesn't care anymore. He pretends to pee into wine buckets by turning his back to the customers and emptying a water bottle into them. He prank calls the restaurant by calling and going, "Go freak yourself," before hanging up. Smokes constantly and is never on time. I love the too close to retirement to care guy. I used to work with one who would answer the phone with, "Hey, what are you up to besides being ugly?" Everyone knew his sense of humor though, and he was much beloved. I work in an office. I have an older lady, 45 to 50, next to me who says, "Awesome sauce," at least 5 times a day. I'm thinking about quitting because of her. Bring a liquor flask to work. Every time she says, "Awesome sauce," yell out, "Woo, there it is," and take a swig. Pretend like it's normal and never explain why. She'll either stop saying it or you'll get so drunk you stop caring. Either way, mission success. I feel like there's some differing opinion on what constitutes that guy or girl. I honestly just thought it was some kind of weird pervert who constantly turned everything towards their nice interest. Turns out it might just be any sort of weirdo. My old coworker. I couldn't tell if he was a mad genius or a man-child. I have not and will not meet anyone else in my life who is anything like this guy. He, 1. was so American that he told me he would show up to my birthday party in a Stars and Stripes banana hammock cawing like an eagle. He moved before my birthday, or I think he actually would have. 2. took the fan and some wires out of a recycled PC. He somehow found a D battery somewhere and hooked it up to the wires so the fan would run. He would lightly fan people as they worked, sometimes right in front of our customers. You nice and cool yet? 3. drafted and made a falcon talon on the end of a magnetic tentacle. The talon is a phone holder. He has a patent and is marketing it soon. There's also a version with a monkey tail on the end of a raptor jaw. 4. He put a rubber band ball on a paperclip, then impaled it to the ceiling of the break room. turned on the strobe function on his phone's flashlight and opened a Pandora Club playlist, told everyone they deserved a disco party and would shriek when someone started to take it down. 5. Hugged an old man who went off on another coworker because he just needs a friend. 6. Strategically planned out how to travel from the front of the store to the back using only the rafters. A section of it he needed to turn into a liquid. He drew a diagram. 7. Printed a bunch of rebel flags on the store printer and gave them to our black supervisor, saying she needed to hand them out to preserve his heritage. He was Southern and completely sarcastic. 8. Printed a banner-sized check made out to him for millions of dollars. Subject was, "Winner for the biggest poop." Plenty more too, I just can't keep them all straight. I miss that guy. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I don't work there anymore, but when I was a delivery driver for a pizza company, there was a guy who just didn't give a frick. The boss had the hots for him, so he got away with so much crap. Never arrived when he was supposed to, always got to go home on time, or early if he wanted, even if we were completely backed up. Whenever he closed, he never cleaned in the back kitchen, so instead of firing him, his shifts got changed to opens. He would take random breaks and play guitar and sing loudly about getting wasted and smoking green herb in the storeroom, loud enough for the customers to hear. At one stage, he even peed on the floor in the room where we made the dough. After a few months, he went on holiday. He never came back, but his name was always on the roster. The stories I have about that place are amazing. I'm thankful I don't work there anymore, but also glad that I did. Worked or trained with a lady once who said bonus in place of any kind of hooray type statement. I just found $1 on the ground. Bonus! I'm taking my girlfriend out on a date tonight. Bonus! I just purchased a delicious beverage from the vending machine. Bonus! I didn't get hurt doing this mildly unsafe task. Bonus! It was getting to be a little much, but she quit very shortly after being hired. I was so thankful. She quits. Bonus! I have an older lady of the same age range as well who says, "Oh, Milanta," all the time. All the time. Thankfully, I don't see her too often since we work in different departments. When I do see her, this inevitably is something she says. I don't get it. How does that phrase become such a crucial part of someone's vocabulary? Oh man, we have the over-opinionated oversharer. We stopped using her real name and now just refer to her as TMI. Hey, did you send that document over yet? Well, I would have if it weren't for the fact that this guy I've been seeing for the past 3 days has this brother who's a total D-bag. He wasn't even considerate of my gluten allergy over the weekend, which really sparked my ADHD, so I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes on Saturday, even though the liberals keep raising the taxes on them, which actually worked out because I lost 3 pounds from not having an appetite. Okay, can you just send it over? This is every conversation. She sounds like she has the most confusing political views ever. Sounds like my coworker. We'll call her Carla. We had a girl transfer to our office last week and Carla had already told her about the UTI she had, like 4 months ago. I've personally heard or overheard the story about her food poisoning incident at least a dozen times. I don't think anyone needs to hear it was coming out of both ends. Ever? Carla was out sick yesterday after having an allergic reaction to something, so heaven help us today if she returns. See also that time she tried to get something off the top shelf and fell and hit her elbow, the 3 times she's had kidney stones, her 2 UTI infections, food poisoning, the 2 dozen mosquito bites she got on vacation, and a partridge in a pear tree. The guy who eats several hard-boiled eggs every morning for breakfast in an open cubicle environment. The smell is somehow worse on Monday mornings. I used to work with a guy who would only eat 4 hard-boiled eggs for lunch each day. But he'd only ever get through 3 of them and he'd walk around the office trying to hand people his extra egg. That was the most normal part about the guy, I'm afraid. Can I offer you a nice egg in this trying time? Is he perhaps eating 4 dozen eggs? If so, he might just be trying to get large. But beware, once he's grown, that number will jump to 5 dozen eggs. Naturally, he'll become approximately the size of a flat-bottomed river vessel. Whenever he wants to say something, he pauses in the middle of the sentence like he's waiting for you to react to every bit of information. So, my son was watching Netflix, pauses for 4 seconds, eye contact all the time, and he told me to join him. Pauses again, to start watching Jessica Jones. He usually does it with a glass of water and takes a sip during the pauses. I used to work with a guy who would eat those Vienna sausages out of the little can, then slurp the juice in the bottom. Oh, no. I cringed so hard at that I think I pulled a muscle in my jaw. There is a special place in hell for people who eat loudly in a busy workplace. I think honestly even hearing the word slurp makes me shudder and gag slightly. But that might just be me being a type A weirdo. I like all of my co-workers. The woman I couldn't stand was HR from corporate. She was here for a week and I could not wait for her to leave. She made sure that we knew she didn't care about me and the other lady, both temporary employees, even though we're likely to be hired. She would not stop talking about how she's single and men were hitting on her in all the countries she had visited on her vacation. She constantly talked about how she's trying to lose weight, but kept eating the fattiest crap I've seen, all while complaining about America's eating habits. She took over our marketing manager's office for the week because she was too lonely in the back area. Sorry, the graphic designer and I are busy working. She would not shut the frick up about shopping. She didn't understand that I don't have extra money to spend. She cooked horrible-smelling fish in the microwave, then proceeded to burn some popcorn later. She kept stealing all of my soft Kleenexes I bought from home. She cancelled our work Halloween party. Good lord, she was unpleasant. Apparently, I live in a TV show and no one told me. When I was in the Air Force, there were plenty of these types of people, but there was one legend who'll outlive them all. Let's call him Vic. Vic was in his late 30s maybe, balding, overweight, annoying, and generally the worst NCO the US Air Force ever saw. Here's a list of his accomplishments. Vic routinely practiced terrible weapon discipline. He would constantly have his weapon pointed at you. He couldn't even clear his weapon to enter the chow hall. A Marine had to do it for him. I had never been so embarrassed to be an airman in all my service. Vic somehow came back to the site with junk every single day. We have no idea where he found it or what half of it was. He once brought back a gigantic Donkey Kong-looking hammer, no explanation for its intended use. Another time he came back with a belt of ammunition that he'd found on the road. Yeah, sure, you know, it's a war zone, people get blown up every day by improvised explosives on the side of the road. Just go pick up something like that. Vic would argue with you about where your hometown is located geographically. Vic was responsible on more than one occasion for complete mission failure. The specifics I can't quite divulge, but rest assured he was brilliantly stupid. Vic could barely speak or write English. He was born in Florida. His ancestors came to this country a couple of hundred years ago. Vic dropped a T-wall, gigantic concrete wall, on a tent with a front loader. Almost killed someone. Vic wore my uniform top back to his barracks, but then later denied the whole thing. Vic was fired from his position twice on 2 separate deployments. Saw him a year later, he had been promoted. This lady at my office has freakishly good hearing and preemptively does weird helpful things for people. Like yesterday, an intern asked one of our agents for the agent's code. Her office is at the other end of the suite, but somehow she heard, wrote down each agent and their code on a post-it, and brought it to the intern's desk. If she overhears someone speaking with service ops about a specific form, she'll quietly email them a copy. Little things like that. People think it's super creepy. I only know this because it's me and I just overheard my coworkers talking about how weird I am. Oh. Maybe you should stop for a week and see what happens. Maybe they'll miss it or you can be lazier. Don't stop doing what you're doing. Just pipe up and say, "Oh, I have that info for you right here." People will appreciate you without the creep factor ever being added in. My boss leaves notes at my desk for me every so often ranging from "you look good today" to "I fricking hate you." My personal favorite, he once wrote "love you" on a sheet on my desk, then went to my coworker's cube next to mine and I could hear him writing something. When he left, the coworker and I both asked, "What did he write on your desk?" and showed each other simultaneously. His said, "You, not so much." Oh man, let me tell you about Hugo. Where to begin? It's holiday party time, and the ice is all frozen into one big chunk. Not to worry though, Hugo is on it. Here's a big rusty hammer borrowed from one of the foresters. Don't worry about using a dirty hammer to break up something you're about to put in your drink. A little iron oxide in your soda is good for the constitution. Am I right? What's that you say? A cake for someone's retirement? How nice! Hugo will cut himself a nice big slice, then lick the frosting off the knife before putting it back in the cake. Yes, we all saw you do that, and yes, we're going to wash the knife. Heck yes, another holiday party. What is this item on the buffet? Will Hugo like it? Guess he had better stick his fork in there to grab a piece to try while standing in line. Oh no, Hugo has a cold. Better go gurgle some water in the kitchen sink, then spit it back out. Oops, he forgot to take a sponge everyone uses to clean their dishes out of the sink first. Oh well, better just leave it in there. It's all dirty now. Bonus time, I also work with Jacob. One day, a mutual coworker left a salad out on her desk because she had an errand to run during lunch. When she came back, half of the salad was gone. What's this? A note from Jacob? Apparently the salad looked too good and he couldn't help himself. Schlepp brings in 2 bags every day filled with his crap, like a bagman. Notebooks, clothes, food, toys, junk. He leaves little bits of paper around, upon which little pieces of his mind spill out, like the third chair from the window. What the frick does that even mean? He writes Doctor Who fanfiction, and we got to read some once. Not good. Smiles and mumbles and never looks anyone in the eye. I think he's gonna kill us someday. Guy openly declared he took the job because he expected it to be nothing but ugly, fat women. He obviously meant it because he couldn't work with any of the more attractive women in the office. Constantly told one that she was too pretty to be smart, and then would switch it up by telling her how stupid she was. Constantly scoffed at anyone who offered him help, and never hesitated to mention that he had a master's degree. Told me, "Don't frickin' argue with me," around co-workers when I corrected him. He was wrong. Had a loud booming voice in an office where voices carry, and would stand in your office saying the most inappropriate things like, "I like to bang pregnant girls because they can't get pregnant." Came in one day after being at an adult club all night and walking to work after his car broke down with a sunburn on one half of his body. He didn't hesitate to tell everyone exactly what had happened. A girl was stretching and had her arms extended out, and he, likely purposefully, walked crotch first right into her hand and proclaimed loudly, "Stop touching my Johnson!" Had some neurological issue which caused him to shake a bit, not Parkinson's, pretty regularly, and would compound that by downing no less than 5 cups of coffee before 10 a.m. until he was a total mess. Updated service tickets with very helpful and professional comments like, "Dropped in your queue like it's hot," and "Solved this problem like a boss." When he was finally confronted about the list of transgressions, he confided, "I'm surprised it took them so long to talk to me about it." What's the strangest thing about the UK as an outsider? Saying "Way" when someone falls over. Or drops a glass. People apologizing when passing in front of you at the supermarket. Feels good though.
I'm in the UK from Canada. I can't imagine anywhere not apologizing anytime you mildly inconvenience another person.
UK here, but my American ex seemed surprised that while "let's go for a pint after work" in the US meant "let's go get a drink and then head home," here in the UK it's more like "let's go get smashed after work." Apparently you really mean that crap when you say one drink.
I was gonna deny that, but it's actually kinda true. I live in New York, and when a friend says, "Wanna grab a beer?" it means 3 to 4 beers at the most. If we're looking to get sauced, we always just say, "You want a drink tonight?"
This would be a convo with my other half. Me, "Babe, moff out." Her,
"Out yeah, not out out."
"Yeah, babe, just out."
"Alright, see you soon."
For context, out being a pub or a mate's house for a few, and out being clubs or a 12-hour bender or whatnot.
Putting an X at the end of their text messages.
I didn't even realize this was a UK thing. I thought everyone did it. Important to note, the levels of affection the amount of kisses provided indicates. X is a casual acquaintance, 2 X's a friend, 3 X's definitely shagging and or in love, 4 X's anything more than 3 X's puts you firmly in the psychopath spectrum in my opinion. There's a guy I work with and his wife sends about 20 X's after every single message, even if it's just like a sentence long. Something's going wrong there.
Yeah, the meanings of 1 or 2 are a bit fluid, but if you go for 3, that's definitely a leap beyond basic friendship and courtesy.
Now you mention it, a lot of my British friends do this, and I'd never really clicked that it was a common link. Interesting. And I should clarify, despite what a lot of commenters seem to think, I'm not actually British, so I'm being as educated here as any of you are.
I just think the names they give to places are so oddly fascinating, like Stoke-on-Trent or Kingston-upon-Thames or Aldermanbury Square. They all just seem so whimsical and full of history.
UK place names can tell you so much about the place. The Anglo-Saxons were fastidious with some of the geographical naming conventions, so the form of hill they used can tell you what kind of hill it is, whether it's steep, plateaued, etc. So like Swindon came from a name that meant a plateaued hill with pigs on it. Or you can tell whether Vikings had a prominent presence there. Like all the seaside towns up north that end up B, are using an Old Norse name element, and Skagness might once have been a home to a very bearded person because of the Old Norse hweg element. Possibly the skeggy bit could also just be a name. There are some excellent ones in the southwest where I'm from. Budleigh Salterton, Cheriton, Fitzpaine, Westward Ho! The exclamation mark is actually part of the spelling. Lustly Cleave. All of the accents in a relatively small area. I'm a Brit and I live in the Midlands and go to university. I only live, and grew up, 45 minutes from my uni, but everyone from that area sounds completely different from me, and occasionally I'll have a communication breakdown with the locals as we just cannot understand each other's certain terms or slang. The food alters an awful lot too. At uni, I can get oatcakes really easily. They're everywhere, it's bliss, but back home it's difficult to find any. I'm obsessed with British panel shows. I don't know how people over there feel about them, but I'll spend hours on YouTube watching old episodes of Cats Does Countdown and Would I Lie to You. These are just quality comedy for me and far better than all the dumb reality shows on TV here in the States. Panel shows are popular here, but they're seen in the comedy scene as a necessary evil to get popular enough to go on tour. Watch UK Taskmaster if you want to see the greatest show ever made. Alright, this is wildly inaccurate. Every person on those shows will have been touring and doing the circuit for years. As an outsider who does watch a lot of them, it seems like panel shows are viewed as a reliable source of income you get to have when you're already popular. Downplaying everything, like, yeah, that's alright food, when in fact it was an excellent dining experience. It's out of love for the ironic statement. Bit windy in a force 9 gale. You think there's an issue when the house is on fire? You've got red on you when you're covered in blood. Or when things are horrendous. That stiff upper lip. My mate was 30 when she found out that her dad had lung cancer. He deteriorated rapidly while she was pregnant and died just 2 days before her baby was born. I went over to look after the kids so she could deal with the funeral arrangements, etc. When I asked how she was doing, she sighed and said, "I'll admit, I'm not great." She obviously cried, grieved, and talked through her feelings, but when she had crap to be getting on with, she was amazing at powering through what needed to be done. For anyone wanting an insight into the British understatement, here's something to keep in mind. In everyday language, not bad means, hey, this is pretty good. It can also mean that something's not actually bad, but not great either. It's down to the tone of voice. Meanwhile, not great means awful in no uncertain terms. For a person to describe themselves as honestly not great or not doing great means their world is out of kilter and they're dealing with an existential crisis which may well haunt them for the rest of their lives and would possibly send others to their knees. Tea and sympathy is required in these circumstances. Using the tube during rush hour as a tourist was like a sci-fi dystopian novel. Everyone was dressed the same and completely silent except for a few people saying sorry to anyone who touched them or that they touched. And nobody laughed when the posh English lady on the intercom kept saying, "Next stop, Cockfosters. Transfer here for Tooting Broadway. Mind the gap." There's actually a reason for this. A lot of dystopian writing was based on English conformity in the world of work. The most obvious examples I can give is Orwell's 1984, where conformity is displayed truthfully among the elitism which still exists in Britain even now. Yeah, it's strange being in a country like the UK where we all technically speak the same language, but the subtle differences and new systems make it so alien. And the commuting systems are the peak of it in my mind. Having tea. When I went over to the UK for a holiday, the people who I visited asked me what I wanted for tea. Like an ignorant fool, I replied with rooibos. They were not asking what kind of tea I'd like, apparently. I felt a bit stupid to be honest, but at least I know something new now. Nah, it's all good fun. I love laughing and talking about different terminology and cultures, like chips and crisps, car park, parking lot. Actually, even here people do argue about what tea means. Even bread rolls, buns, cobs. Here in the deep south of England, we use tea to mean dinner. It's just contextual, like no one ever is confused about which tea the person means. I watch a lot of Premier League and thus watch a lot of fan channels on YouTube. I'm amazed at how quickly you guys can pull the most unique insults out of thin air and continue like it's nothing. Lukaku is crap, mate. He couldn't hit water from a boat. Captain, he couldn't lead a pack of ants to a picnic. There's obviously better ones, but I'm not as quick-witted as the Brits, so I'm not exactly doing it justice. But I love your humour and basically everything around football culture. Could fall into a barrel full of breast and come out sucking his thumb was a classic one of these. This is magic. This is how words were originally intended to be compiled. I hate to tell ya, I went to a ton of games a couple of seasons back, and we aren't really being witty more than we remember 2 or 3 really solid lines and use them for a variety of players. Plus, a big umbrella term for analysis is just calling them wank. Frickin' Ozil, he's frickin' wank, mate. Mesut Ozil in probability isn't actually bad. He's a world-class midfielder and a World Cup winner. However, should he have a bad game, he's thereby relegated to wank until he has a good run of form, which is known as doing alright. If he actually has a good season, he will basically be deified and have songs created about him. See Mohamed Salah for Liverpool the last 2 seasons. Actually, that's something the Terraces, football crowd, does over here that you don't see in America, is songs sung about individual players. They can be good or bad. When I went to see Everton a few years back, the crowd was singing to Tim Howard to the tune of London Bridge is Falling Down. Timmy Howard's got Tourette's, got Tourette's, got Tourette's. Timmy Howard's got Tourette's, frick, crap, wanker. I thought the strangest thing in the UK was the bars and nightclubs with signs saying to not attack paramedics. Unfortunately, all too necessary from what I've heard. For some inexplicable reason, a lot of paramedics have been attacked when trying to help people. I think it's because people fear them getting the police involved if you've got substances on or in you. In reality, paramedics only give a crap what substances you've got so they can try to help you. No use thinking someone is having a heart attack when they really just need naloxone. Such polite insults. I was watching some Brexit crap a while ago, and some fella told another dude that he was screaming across the bar in the most eccentric fashion. American here who's been on and off following Brexit. I love watching the House of Commons and especially Burko. In Congress, there's the idea of order and civility and not talking while someone else is. Over there's a whole lot of rebelling and sass, and I love it. I'm British, and the only insults I ever hear are long lists of things that would get you demonetized on YouTube. I was in Bath yesterday, and some dude, probably in his early 20s, quite posh, in a suit, wandering down the main shopping street, having to stop and recalibrate himself every few steps. It was only about 5 p.m. Nice counterpoint to the tourists and the beautiful 18th century buildings. He's just practicing his silly walk. He was on his way to the Ministry of Silly Walks to get a research grant. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The pub is the most culturally UK place, and queuing is the most UK behaviour. Yet, there's no queuing for a drink in a pub. It's a mental queue. Everyone knows who at the bar is to be served next. Sorry, love, he's before me. Until you get the slag who knows full well he's cutting in front of you and others. The bar staff usually clock who's next anyway and ignore them, or you just have to sort it yourself. Oi mate, not you, and a thumb over to the person you know who is in front of you. As a resident of the Nordic countries, I would contest that queuing is more British than Nordic, especially Sweden. It's like a gosh darn religion over there. I've only been to London, but well-dressed people passed out drunk in alleyways at 11 a.m. Also, the very defined rules about when you can speak to each other. People are very friendly within the bounds of the rules, but literally panic if someone engages with them outside of these bounds. Also, the drinking culture. Just wow. I want to clarify that I mean wow in both a positive and negative sense. A cleaning lady scared out of her mind by 20 drunks in a male bathroom was bad, but being able to drink from a bottle of wine as I wandered around the city with my friend and not have to worry about the cops was fantastic. Alright, now people are writing to me that it's illegal to walk around town drinking, but I will counter that I walked past whole groups of people on the source on the sidewalk, so I guess that if the police were enforcing that one, I guess I was the least of their worries. Okay, more people have written into me, and apparently it's not illegal. Good to know. I gotta say that for the most part, I adore the British. Got to say that as a southerner, this is quite true down here, but as soon as you get up north, everyone is much friendlier and loves a chat. I met a dude from up north the other day, and he said the same thing without me mentioning my thoughts, whether positive or negative. He told me that he was very sorry that my whole perception of the UK had been formed in London. As a Brit, reading all of these stories has been a real treat. It might just be lunchtime beer talking, it's Friday after all, but I've really enjoyed myself. Cheers. Constantly making jokes about pedos. Dark humor in general. One of my mates was chatting up a girl in a pub once, and once he nipped to the loo, I went over and told her she'd better watch him as he was a convicted pedophile. She shot off back to her mates and wouldn't talk to him again. When I told him why, he just laughed and called me the C-word. I'm Portuguese and I lived in the UK for 2 years. The use of cheers confused me so much. When I'm supposed to use it? Is it a thank you? A goodbye? A hello? I'm supposed to reply cheers in return? I know it's probably because of a long shared cultural history and that most people live and die in the same areas they're born, but I don't understand the different stereotypes based on towns, cities, and villages. I'm not talking really big generalities like people in the north are friendlier or people in London are more hurried and fast-paced. I'm not talking about large regional differences. I'm talking stereotypes based on specific, very small places. Well, he was from Derbyshire, collective eye roll, so you know how he was. You know how all those Yorkshiremen of a certain age act. All the heads nod in unison. I grew up in Kent, so I was not familiar with how those chavs from Milton Keynes spoke. Multiple harumphs. I have no frickin' clue what being from a specific small town or village means, but it seems everyone in the UK knows all the different stereotypes and idiosyncrasies of every village in the whole gosh darn country. It's basically a class thing. Everyone thinks the next town over is a crap hole, but if the big city 2 towns over says the same thing, then you all unite against them, and so on. Pull cord switches, mostly in bathrooms. Where I come from, we only have attached to the wall switches, except for maybe some super old lamps. One thing I can't wrap my head around is how people go partying wearing nothing but a shirt or small dress, regardless of the weather, which is often quite cold, especially in, winter. I observe large groups of such people every weekend. They're not even carrying jackets or anything, and they're taking the bus. This would be semi-understandable if they took cabs everywhere and literally didn't spend more than a couple of minutes outside. I've been living in the UK for 5 years, and what still gets me is people saying, "You all right?" instead of "How are you?" For me, the "you all right" makes me think I look sad or sick. It's weirdly accusatory, even though I know it just means "How are you?" We have that in Cumbria too, a whole conversation played out as "Right, right." Thank you, and most of the time when they say it to each other, it doesn't even seem to be a question, just 2 people saying "all right" to each other, not answering the question and moving on to the next part of the chat. Here in Ireland, Dublin anyway, we dropped the "you." We just say "all right," and the reply is also "all right." If you're not all right, you don't mention it. American living in London for a few years now. One of the biggest things is definitely the drinking culture and how much it's embedded in all of society. I thought coming from the States that we drank a lot, but here it's on a different level. It's very common to have a pint or 2 during lunch breaks before going back to work. Pubs are on every corner, and the public drinking laws are astounding for an American. The sense of orderliness and politeness. Brits are amazing, diligent with following the rules. They queue quietly for public transportation, stand on the right, and don't outwardly complain when something goes wrong, though they're the best at tutting under their breath. Keep calm and carry on really is practiced in every part of life here. There's a sense of collectivism that I sometimes find strange when coming from a country that prides itself on individualism. Humor. The British humor relies completely on sarcasm, while American humor is more in-your-face slapstick. They each have their place and time, but sometimes it can feel exhausting to constantly have to unpack British comedy or humor due to its constant push for double entendres, ambiguity, and innuendos. Innuendo. I feel far too British to agree with the above comment and then chuckle at yours. As a Dutch person, the same sense of orderliness really struck me as well. It's like London is insanely crowded hell, though Amsterdam is worse, but everyone is doing their best to make it easier for each other. If the escalator sign says to stand on the left and walk on the right, or vice versa, people actually do what it says. It's amazing. It's great, but it leaves us with incredibly short fuses in cultures that don't have these customs in place. I'm a Brit living in China. I have to drink at least twice the tea I used to in order to recover from my subway journeys. If you would just bloody wait for me to alight the train, there will be ample time for you to board without having to push into me. So I'm British and I have an American friend I compare cultural notes with. One of my weirdest was when I mentioned finding a postbox from Victoria's reign. She was like, "You mean your mailboxes carry information about the current leader of your country?" To which I replied, "Of course they do, it's the Royal Mail." Postboxes note the E, 2, and R and crown at the base, indicating it was placed in Elizabeth II's reign. The royal family. Are they just mascots of the UK, or do they hold any political power? Officially, the Queen does hold some political power, but she chooses not to exercise it, as she's required to be politically neutral. This is mostly relevant when it comes to passing legislature. Officially speaking, it requires the monarch's consent before a new piece of legislature is confirmed, but no monarch has actually declined to do so in more than 3 centuries. There are some other parts of the process of government that require her consent or participation, but these are mostly ceremonial, such as the opening of each parliamentary session, think of these like school semesters, or the official appointment of the Prime Minister. In most other respects, they do act as mascots, though many of them also manage various aspects of the Crown Estate, which involves managing businesses and charity outreach programs, maintaining property and land, etc. Many of them also hold, or have held, positions in the military, though I think most British Prime Ministers have said that they really valued talking things over with the current Queen at their weeklies, as she was such a confidential, neutral, experienced and pretty wise and level-headed person, except for when it comes to her children. I suspect Charles, if he doesn't pop his clogs before Liz does, will be much more of a pain in the arse. Hi, I'm from Germany and have spent some time in the UK. The one thing that was weird but nice was that people are polite when it comes to using public transportation. One time, the most annoying teenagers on the bus I was on stood up and left their seats as soon as two old ladies got on the bus. I find fascinating the current hatred and rivalry between the different countries of the UK. The Scottish government seems to despise the central UK government, which is England-dominated. In fact, it's really weird how even the Welsh, and to some extent the Republican Northern Irish, resent the domination of England in the UK as a whole. Weirdly enough, the English don't have their own devolved parliament, so the UK legislates for the whole of Britain as well as England-specific issues, giving rise to the West Lothian questions. Just a century ago, it seemed that whether Scottish or Welsh, everyone had no problem with being called British back then, when the British Empire was at its peak. Except the Irish, of course. Well, I studied there for a year, and I've been there countless times before, and after, I'm astounded at how much junk food there is everywhere. The first thing I was told when I moved there was, look out for chavs. I didn't know what chavs were, but not even 5 minutes after I arrived there had been two chavs fighting outside the supermarket right next to where I lived, with blood splatters still on the pavement when I walked to the supermarket. A little bit later, I learned quickly that you needed to avoid them at most cost. What I found fascinating was that the chavs could be any age, young or old. But the weirdest thing for me with the UK is that for a city to get the status of a city, it needs to have a cathedral. So for a big town like Middlesbrough, they can never become a city unless this is changed, and there are over 200,000 people living there. Hey, pal, sounds like you were at the Teesside Uni. My own hometown, no less. Chavs are a scary type, but they're also quite a complex social group. Not all are equal. Fun fact, Middlesbrough does have a cathedral. It's been rejected for what we call devolved city status since 2012, largely due to mayoral and councillor arguments. UK local politics deserves its own thread. To be a city in the UK, you need either historically to be regarded as a city from before the 12th century or have been conferred city status by the government. Originally, the title of city was likely to be given to places with cathedrals, as they would be important settlements, but it's never been a prerequisite. I live near Brighton and Hove, which was granted city status in the 21st century, but doesn't have a cathedral. What is the most pathetic way someone has tried to assert dominance over you? I always feel like the guys who refuse to make room for you when walking by in the other direction are trying to assert their dominance and make themselves feel like hot crap. I never understood why people do that. I figured out the best way to handle this when I was in college and the sidewalks were narrow. Just stop walking and stand still. Now they're the only ones walking and have to go out of their way to avoid you, instead of them expecting you to move. He tried to drink water faster than me. No one drinks water faster than me. No one drinks a tall glass of water like Gaston. Worked as a lifeguard at a summer camp years ago. During safety training, we had to do a missing persons search, which required all available staff to join hands and walk from the beach to the water as far as we could, while feeling with our feet for the missing swimmer. During training, there was a sandbag we had to find. The guy next to me kept insisting on holding mine in a certain way because I will take the upper hand in this situation, said at me while staring down. Whatever, dude, we're theoretically looking for a drowned child right now. Earlier this year, my boss asked me to do something and then leaned over me and said, "You are going to do it." He was like literally leaning over me because he was 6'8". Dude acted like a cliché high school bully from an 80s movie and was like 40 years old, so I assume he was at some point. Anyways, he quit. I used to tend bar in Milwaukee, and there's nothing that triggers bros more than seeing someone drinking something that they personally don't like. I can't tell you how many arguments began with some guy, always unsolicited or unprovoked, mind you, feeling compelled to judge and educate other guys about what they're drinking or not drinking. You drink that? And it goes downhill from there. Nobody cares. Drink what you like and shut up. I was at a bar in Stevens Point and the barman whips out a skin flick mag asking if I want to read it. No thanks. Why not? Are you gay?
He looked as if I'd offended his ancestors by not wanting to read his adult magazine in the middle of a bar.
Yeah, I used to know cliché blokey wannabes growing up who had deluded themselves into thinking that this was a totally normal thing to do. Keep it private, folks. No friendship is enhanced by looking at naughty bits together. Literally last weekend, some really drunk dude who I've never met once or interacted with tried to fight me to impress the girls he was with. It was completely ridiculous, and his way of trying to initiate it was just to repeatedly body check me on the dance floor, which I ignored because I thought he was just being drunk and dumb. Turns out one of his friends had to stop him from blindsiding me with a sucker punch to the face, assuming he was able to aim that well. Some people do not mix well with alcohol, apparently. My husband is a tall dude and told me that while at university, he constantly had guys trying to pick fights with him at the bar. It was like they found the biggest guy there was and was like, "Yep, I'm gonna beat him up." My husband is the biggest softy though, so he would just kind of laugh and brush them off. I've worked at bars my whole life, and this is very common. If you're tall, you're a target. It makes no sense and has nothing to do with the personality of the tall guy. It's just what it is. It's even worse for bouncers. The mentality, which is probably subconscious, is that if you're an aggressive smaller guy and you fight a bigger guy, it's a win-win. Either you lost because he's bigger, or you won and took down the bigger guy. It's funny because over the years, I've never had a problem with big guys. The 6'5" dudes are fine. It's always the short dudes you have to kick out. People are weird. A former co-worker, he would just stand in the way and refuse to move. Even if he wasn't in the way, he would purposefully get in the way. I work in a narrow kitchen, so you can imagine how annoying that could be. At one particular moment, I was carrying a bulky 20-pound box, and he decided to do that. I pretended not to see him and barreled into him. He fell over and got incredibly mad at me. Started talking about how I have no muscle. It was actually pretty funny. It was a display of the most fragile masculinity I have ever seen. Similar experience. I had a regular keg and one of those skinny kegs on my shoulders. I was hustling to get through the narrow kitchen to replace the blown kegs for the bartender. Idiot guy who did the block game did the same to me, and I definitely barreled into him. He proceeded to jump up and try to trip me in the bar, to which I dropped the skinny keg on his foot. Like, you see someone with heavy crap, don't be a butthole. Not me, but my wife. We were living in an apartment complex and my wife had just parked her car, was carrying groceries and my 2-year-old inside, and this guy stopped her and said, "That's my spot. You need to move your car now." We don't have assigned spaces, but my wife was caught like a deer in headlights and put all the groceries and my daughter back in the car and moved it, just so he could park his 10-year-old Cadillac CTS in his favorite spot. I always got home from work before this guy, however. I never directly confronted him. But from then on, that parking spot became my spot, and I parked there every single day for the next 2 years. I saw him out and about a few times, but thankfully being 6'1" and overweight and bearded, most people chose not to fight with me, even though I've never been in a fight and would be helpless in a confrontational situation. In junior high, I remember this one bully that would get on his tiptoes and puff out his chest like a gorilla, and get all in your face whenever he felt threatened. It was such a funny stereotype maneuver. He did that once to one of my friends as he was trying to start a fight. He'd spread his arms wide and push out his chest while aggressively asking, "You wanna go? Huh? You wanna go?" Without a word, my friend grabbed his collar and pulled him into a headbutt, knocking him to the ground, delirious in one hit. My friend, in fact, wanted to go. Plot twist. The guy was asking your friend to go to the prom with him. Double plot twist. The headbutt was actually a kiss, and the bully swooned. Sounds like my high school. A friend of mine was this short, about 5'6" at the time, built like a little tank wrestler who was a huge nerd. D&D, magic, you name it, he loved it. There was a giant football player, 6'4", who was a notorious jackass. Football player starts harassing my friend, calling him the usual, "I'm a big tough man," insults. My friend asks him to stop. The football player puffs up his chest and says, "You wanna frickin' go, little man?" My friend turns slightly and drives his elbow right into the guy's solar plexus. It's pretty hard to look tough when you're gasping for air like a fish out of water. Forgot to mention my friend had been talking about a new D&D campaign he was working on when this happened. One time at a house party, a few of us were talking to some girls, and one of the guys randomly started talking about how he does MMA. Then another guy joined in, and those two started wrestling in front of the girls. I don't think their shirts needed to come off, but what the frick do I know? Taking off your shirt is proper MMA procedure and culture. Leaving them on could have dishonored their whole family. This happened over D&D when my friend, who owns a store, let these guys we didn't know that well join our campaign. I don't know why I, out of the table, got singled out, but a girl walks in and this guy complained that I didn't order pizza for him. Said, "How about you go frick yourself," when I asked him if he wanted some of mine. Walked over behind me and, playfully, put his arms around my neck. I told him I'd punch him in the face if he did it one more time because I don't know who the frick he is. It absolutely ruined my day. By flicking my boy bosoms. I was standing in the breezeway outside a friend's apartment while in college, and a guy coming down the stairs from an upper floor kinda tripped near the bottom of the stairs and stumbled into me. It was clear that he was super drunk and immediately got aggressive. He was so worked up about being tougher than me that for some reason he started doing push-ups at me while me and my friends just laughed. Fortunately, his friends came and apologized and took him back up the stairs, but it was definitely the most bizarre assertion of dominance I've ever encountered. His lizard hindbrain is apparently of the Texas spiny lizard variety. They do push-ups at each other to defend their territories, which are frequently suburban driveways. I don't know about no lizards, but I can confirm for y'all that a drunk push-up contest to assert dominance is pretty Texan. I don't know if push-upping spiny lizards are actually a thing or not, and you know what? I don't care to Google it, because finding out that they didn't exist would only be disappointing to me now. Generally, guys purposely bumping into you when you walk past them, especially if they're with friends. My high school was overcrowded, so hallways were always packed, but I always did my best to move for people or turn myself so people could get through. But I realized I was always the one moving for other people, so one day I decided not to move for people, and most of the guys I encountered in the hall would just run into me because they refused to move. Like, just move. My daily commute on the subway was like this, people standing directly in front of the doors and even trying to enter as if you were just a spectre image they can walk through. I used to move out of their way or excuse myself. Now I just do the same and walk through them if they refuse to move. I simply expect this to be an unfortunate normal part of my life going forward, lest I be the one knocked over or missing the opportunity to disembark again. I work in a grocery store and sometimes I help unload the delivery trucks when our delivery comes in on what we call cages. Like a 6-foot cage on wheels, and obviously one that's full of toilet paper will be really light, and one filled with 2-liter bottles of juice are the heavy ones. The lift that lowers them from the truck has that patterned metal floor, and you have to pull the heavy ones hard just to get them off. Now, I'm 5'8" and don't have a lot of weight on me, but I can pull these cages off just fine. But there's a guy who's like 6'2" and is always trying to show how strong he is. So whenever I'm helping and he's there, he always insists that he gets the heavy cages and I get the little guy cages. Everyone agrees he needs to grow up. Guys like that are great though, because you can just chill and let them do all the annoying work if they feel the need to prove something. This is brilliant. Subtly threaten their masculinity and watch them do all the hard work. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A friend tried to make himself look good in front of his crush by literally putting me in a random chokehold for a laugh. Turns out it was because I was talking to her. I had a girlfriend at the time, we were just talking. It wasn't a chokehold though, it was basically just a headlock, so I decided to correct him. I was fairly oblivious and didn't realize this was a failed alpha move. Creeped the crap out of his crush that he would do that out of nowhere, and she stopped talking to him. Apparently she quite liked him up until that point, so he kinda shot himself in the foot. Because romantic interests respond well to displays of unprovoked aggression and violence, right? Right? I just love a man who can fly off the handle at any moment. Was out having a drink. Started chatting to the guy next to me when I learned that he too is a musician. He then tells me, "You're not a musician. I find it offensive when people tell me they're a musician when they haven't put in the time and dedication that I have." Okay, dude, come down off your ego trip. Jesus Christ. What the frick? How the frick would he know how much time and dedication you put into it? Heck, for all you know, he hasn't put in any either. Frick, he isn't even devoted enough to music to prefer it to feeding his ego. Anyway, here's Wonderwall. I had someone stand on their tippy toes to seem taller when we were talking. Talked about how the MBA program at his alma mater was superior to where I was getting my MBA. For clarification, he doesn't have and isn't working on an MBA, but wanted to be sure I knew he was better because he went to a school with a perceived better program. So when I was in the 8th grade, there was this one kid who hated me for no reason. I was really big for my age, and there was no way this 5'1" guy was going to fight me, so he did something so cringy I have no idea what he was going for. I was sitting at lunch with my friends, and this kid walks up to us and spits in my glass of milk and says in a very commanding tone, "Drink." I just stood up and the kid bolted. Got a good laugh out of it with my friend though. To be clear, I did not drink the milk. You just reminded me of the one time in high school a freshman sitting across from me, I was a senior, decided that bothering me was his ticket to alpha status or something. One day at lunch, he threw a curly fry into my drink and asked me what I was going to do about it. He had just gotten back from the snack bar with a couple of cookies and an unopened bottle of soda, so I just reached over and took those. I didn't really like the soda, and I only wanted one cookie, so I doled the rest out to my friends. He just laughed nervously. Once I realized he wasn't going to do anything about it, I thanked him for the cookie.
Freshman being a butthole. You gonna do something about it? Senior does something about it. Freshman surprised Pikachu JPEG.
When asked about what his hobbies are, he responded with, "Hobbies are for children and single women. I work."
You want to know how cool I am? You want to know how tough I am? I'm so tough that I have no life, interests, or friends.
Oh, fun. Sounds like the kind of guy who'll either work himself to death or suffer a complete mental breakdown 1 week into retirement. The type of person who after he retires will have no idea how to occupy himself, so he'll spend his time calling the police over minor noise complaints and hassling his neighbors over where his exact property line is. We had a candidate come into the interview and legit say that he wanted to sit behind the desk because he was going to be the one asking the questions to decide if he wanted to work with us. I think he'd gotten some bad advice about having confidence. I laughed, but our HR manager flipped out. The only time I've ever actually seen her call security.
What was the guy's reaction once he realized it was going so badly?
Oh, he commented, "Well, this is obviously a hostile work environment, blah blah blah."
Was on a 4-hour flight, in a 2-person row. The guy demanded to have full access to the middle armrest, would push my arm off it if I ever got near it.
Oh man, I was in the middle of a 3-seat row. The guy on my left was some kind of exec, checking his work email on his laptop. Anyway, after the first hour of armrest jockeying, I just asked him,
"Are we doing this the entire flight?"
He pretended to not speak English. The mother fricker was reading his emails in English and pulled the no hables card on me. He finally conceded the armrest after that. Yeah, I think it's common consensus that the person in the middle seat gets both their armrests, isn't it? It's one of those unspoken rules that you would feel like a jackass for trying to enforce, though. I was walking to my car after school and this guy was getting in his car and just yells at me, "You ugly as frick, bro." I flipped him off without even looking at him and he called me the B word and drove off. How petty do you have to be to tell someone minding their own business that they're ugly? People that shout out of cars are cowards.
Excuse me, they prefer the term scrub.
I was leaving a gas station once with a 6-pack of some craft beer to go watch a game at my friend's house, and a group of college kids were driving out of the parking lot, and one yelled out the window, "6-packs are for slang word for female anatomy." I guess the amount of beer I was planning on drinking that night wasn't adequate to his standards. Had a dude get mad at me for talking to his girl all the time. I was her econ tutor. I once tutored this truly clueless girl at general chemistry. She wanted to be a nurse and couldn't get past the first class, but whatever, I'll tutor you. She was, however, very pretty. Second tutoring session, she shows up with her boyfriend. Dude doesn't study, doesn't say a damn word the whole 2-hour session, just stares at me and her going over the basics of chemistry. Next class, same thing. Next class, I bring my girlfriend to have a stare-off with him. He got the message and left us alone. If you can't trust your partner to spend 2 hours in a crowded university library without screwing someone else, you probably shouldn't be with that person. I had a guy message me threats on Facebook because I'd been talking to his girlfriend. The thing is, his girlfriend is my cousin and I don't live in Alabama. I guess she couldn't speak to anyone at all.
A friend of mine had a girl send her a ton of nasty texts one day, totally out of the blue. "Stay away from him, he loves me, you're probably an ugly B-word, etc. My friend is the guy's aunt.
Was at a party and was given the task of handing out beers to people. This guy flipped his crap, saying he only drank real beer. Dude, it was cold and free. That's the best beer there is. A guy was mad at me while sitting at a light and was revving his engine. It sounded like he'd held it at the red line, and there was a big crack sound and smoke started pouring out the front of his car. The dummy had blown his engine.
That's when you throw your head back and laugh as you slowly accelerate forward in your 2013 Dodge Dart.
My neighbor in front of my house had a boyfriend that would literally rip his shirt off and come outside every single time I was in my front yard. It could be 7 a.m. or midnight, but it wouldn't matter to him. I could be walking to my car and here comes Mr. Globo Jim flexing all around his yard. He would immediately go back inside when I went back inside. This went on for almost half a year until one day I saw him hop into his mega-lifted truck and drive away never to be seen again. He did have some pretty sweet pecs though. I would have spent a day fricking with him. Go outside a while and wait for him to come out, then just go back in until he leaves, then do it again. Make a buff-looking scarecrow and leave it in your front yard. Or like a cardboard cutout of Ronnie Coleman. One night in college, me and my buddies were walking down the street at about 11:30 p.m. We were near a major university on a street that was almost entirely college kids renting. It was Friday night, warm, so lots of people were out drinking on patios, talking, playing drinking games, etc. Generally pretty chill. We're done pre-gaming at home and headed to a bar or something, I don't remember. Anyway, we're walking down the road and across the street there's some people on a patio. They yelled something at us, we weren't really listening but the tone seemed friendly at least. Woo, yeah, college bro, am I right? Generally, kind of thing. So I yell back, yeah man, cool beans, and return to my conversation. Apparently this guy does not like beans, regardless of temperature, because the next thing I hear is, did you just frickin' say cool beans? And I see this perfect Skylar pop-collar college bro storming off his porch to come across the street at us, looking like I just peed in his Bud Light. I can only respond with a confused, yeah? My group stops. This dude is crossing the street at us looking like he wants to fight. Him? Say it again, bro. What did you just say? Some girl behind him. Just let it go, Blake, or Skylar or Chad, whatever he was called. They didn't mean it. Me. What? Really? My friend? What the frick? I said cool beans. Get the frick out of here, dude, before I kick your butt. Okay, later, bro. And we walked off the street as he started angrily flexing in the middle of the street while his girlfriend is tugging his arm, trying to get him back into the house. We made it to the end of the block, about 3 more houses probably, before my entire group just broke down laughing at the absurdity of it. I really don't understand it. Was it supposed to be a prank? Was he just a drunk dude looking for a fight? Did he think I was intimidated? I'm not sure. Either way, cool beans and did you just frickin' say cool beans? Are still a standard farewell among that group of friends. His whole family was killed in a freak chilled beans accident. His girl saying he didn't mean it is the most intriguing part of the story. Not me, but my dad. My dad has season tickets for the AHL hockey team in town. One day he was late for a game and arrived to see a teen in his seat with his girlfriend. My dad kindly asked him to move, explaining that those were his seats. The teen responded with a quick, "No, it's not." My dad then showed him his season ticket and pointed out on the kids' tickets that their actual seats were a few rows up. The kid got up and tried to square up to my dad. My father was just like, "Really, dude?" and ignored them. The girlfriend began screaming at my dad for being a butthole. Long story short, Dad kindly asked a kid to get out of his seat and the kid tried to intimidate my dad for this. What does your job ask you to hide from the customers? At the hotel I work at, if a guest found a stray bedbug, all staff were instructed to neither confirm nor deny that it was an actual bedbug. Word games were not fun. I experienced that firsthand. Went to a convention that was infested with cockroaches. Collected a few in a cup, went to the front desk to complain. They reassured me that what I saw was just harmless water bugs and there were no roaches anywhere in the hotel. None. Zero. Nada. Had to ask them if they'd be fine with me releasing these harmless bugs in the lobby. And the moment I said that, they froze and realized that there was nothing they could say or do. My last job was a white-labeled help desk. You had to hide the fact that your company existed at all from the customer. You had to pretend that you were from whatever company the customer was using for their IT. I worked for a monitoring center and that's really what we did as well. Instead of saying this is avant-garde, we had to use the name of the company. We monitored for medical buttons like I've fallen and I can't get up, Alert 1, Response Link, Life Protect, EMC security companies, etc. Security systems for homes and businesses, and fire alarms. The thing that made it the most frustrating was when they were doing something wrong on their end and we couldn't just straight up tell them what was wrong. Like they would press their button to hang up, but it just calls us back again and we have to be like, okay, I'm going to disconnect, you don't have to do anything, while they are screaming that we keep calling them, when it would be so much easier to just say, we can't call you, the only way we can get in contact with you is if you press your button, so stop pressing it unless it's an emergency. That company was awful to work for. As a tattoo artist, oftentimes apprentices at the end of their apprenticeships will start to tattoo paying customers, walk-ins, and for a few tattoo shops the apprenticeships are much shorter than they need to be. So if you're getting tattooed but someone seems to be young or they seem inexperienced, they probably are, and they're probably still in their apprenticeship, but the shop will tell you they're actual artists. Do your research when thinking about getting a tattoo, and don't be afraid to wait months or even years for the right artist for you. It'll save you from a really crappy tattoo.
I think this might have happened to me. I went to a shop with a good idea of what I wanted and was prepared to wait to get it. Surprise to me when they said they'd get me in the same day. It looked fine that day and a few months after, but slowly became obvious they didn't go deep enough in some places and had shaky hands on others. Good news is, about 1.5 years after the initial tattoo, I went back to the shop and asked for the artist, who was still working there. He seemed embarrassed and touched it up with no charge. I tipped him good and it looks much better. Still love my tattoo.
A year and a half in the trenches is a long time, especially if he's a naturally talented artist and just needed some time to pick up some tattoo-specific art knowledge and muscle memory. I can tell you he was real glad you came in and let him fix it up. MD in pathology. We're the ones who give bottom-line diagnoses and staging for most cancers and many other diseases. In a weird way, the patient isn't our customer, the doctor is. We're telling them what the diagnosis is and what evidence we have to support it. Anything we can say can trigger them to do a whole new treatment plan or a bunch more tests, so we have to be careful not to mention random things that we see unless we want them acting on it. For example, we might think,
these megakaryocytes are a little small and I see a few more of them bunched together here, but it's only in a couple of spots.
If we bring it up, it might seem more significant than that, and trigger a distracting question about one disease process when we know that's not the actual problem. A big part of the training is learning how to communicate the truth without clouding it with more truth. Unfortunately, this often means that the reports are almost unintelligible to the patients, because they're not the intended audience of the report, really. Put that down to a job I would never want to have responsibility for, either breaking people's hearts or giving them so much information that they don't realize they're in danger is pretty grim. No thank you. The restroom. I work at a small privately owned pet store. It's the most trashy store ever, and the bathroom is a room with a toilet, water heater, and buckets. To use it, you have to go through the back room, which is where we keep the rats and stuff. Basically, it's employees only. Well, one lady asked us to use the restroom, we let her, and she stole a turtle that was being soaked in the sink on her way out. We caught her stuffing it in her bra, but she got away. Now if a customer asks if we have a bathroom, I have to say no. You'd be amazed at how good construction workers become at hiding flaws. It's nearly a part of the job description and a large part of why so many construction efforts is put towards cosmetics, beyond the fact that most people just don't want to be looking at a bunch of rough-in work that's functionally the same but aesthetically atrocious. I concur. I was a finisher for some years, painting, staining, so in other words making your brand new piece of crap house that you paid way too much for look nice. Amazing how many homeowners get duped or just plainly have no idea what they're doing or agreeing to. I've worked at 2 fast food restaurants in my life. At each one, the only time that food safety protocol was followed or enforced was the day that the health inspector was coming in to grade us. I should also note that both stores received 100% every time the health inspector came. Obviously, every restaurant is different, it all comes down to management. The stores I worked at were all about getting food out the door as fast as possible, with the smallest number of people working as possible. That leads to cutting corners. Not all restaurants, even fast food, are like that though. My point in posting was that even though they appear clean or have a high score posted on their health inspection, that doesn't mean they're following all of the guidelines set in place for them. How many people are supposedly working on this really important project? Spoilers, it's just me.
Client, can we add X?
Me? No.
Can we have a discussion on this with the whole team?
You just did. We sell software and we have a page that has instructions on it for setting up Linux servers. But that's basically all we know about the OS and as much as any of us actually care to learn. If asked, the going policy is that our Linux specialist is out this week, but we'll totally refresh what we know by going over the page with you.
Meanwhile, most of us Linux users are thinking, crap, they actually mentioned us.
It does feel like the general principle of Linux is, if you can't work it out on your own, you don't deserve it. I recently just started working at a fairly fancy resort and we just finished renovating a floor of the hotel and a lot of the new furniture had Argentine cowhide as the leather for it. We were instructed to tell guests that it was a fake synthetic material just in case. I work at a deli and bakery currently. All of our food is from frozen and they want me to call it fresh, baked in store every day. Dude, it was frozen for 3 months, thawed for an hour, and then cooked. It's no better than anything else you get from the freezer section, and in many cases, the freezer section is higher quality stuff. At BK, the food is frozen and gets warmed up in an automatic grill, and we're told to tell the customer that the meat is always fresh and there. The last time I ate at Burger King was about 4 to 5 years ago in a food court. I ordered a cheeseburger and watched as an employee literally pulled a burger out of a drawer and shoved it in the microwave. I don't know why, but I couldn't stop laughing to myself. Not now, but back when I worked as an aide at a nursing home, we were forbidden from telling patients that we were short-staffed. We were, and it was the fault of administration because they were trying to save money. But literally the residents would be yelling at us because their shower was late or whatever, and we were supposed to just act like it was because we were lazy. We weren't allowed to tell them it was because I had the entire wing by myself. The administrator was sick of having angry family members calling to complain and decided we should take the brunt of it instead. Have some of the same issues at my job. As a CNA, I'm able to explain to them that we're doing our best, and that I'm sorry for the delay, but on days where we're understaffed by more than 2 people, I tell them. There's no other way to get them to understand. But at my job, it's got the opposite effect. It makes the admin keep us properly staffed for the most part. Best of luck, being an aide is like no other job out there. I'm a pharmacist for a major chain. We were recently told this from our district manager because we kept getting reviews complaining about longer wait times and that we needed more help. Apparently telling patients that filling their scripts would take longer because I was the only one working that day is a big no-no. Cell phone store. Customers returned perfectly good phones all the time. We were told to sell the boxes as brand new, first-time activations and purposefully leave out the fact that they had in fact already been activated and taken home, within 48 hours. I'd be teed off if I brought a phone full price and it was even slightly used. I let those phones get dusty and would never sell them despite that crappy policy. I used to work at one too, and we also did that as well. I think the thing that annoyed me the most was the push to sell the accessories just because it was on a daily basis. I understand the need to sell accessories, but what I didn't understand was the need to sell accessories that do not fit the phones. Like, is it that hard to find accessories that actually fit the phones to their exact model? For example, if you wanted a screen protector, it was either going to fall short around the edges or be too big where we had to cut it so it would fit. It was worse for tempered glass because it was more expensive. I loathed every time I had to sell one. If I didn't, I'd get in trouble and get scolded for not hustling enough. I worked at a small town store, so I knew a good chunk of people and felt terrible selling them. I only sold them whenever managers were present, otherwise I'd just tell customers to order off of Amazon. Screw that place. I love that complete refusal to be a sleazy salesman. Although if someone has got to 2020 without realizing that everything is cheaper online, I feel like you might have just doomed them to a massive online shopping spree when they see the prices there. Our sales prices are just normal prices. Had to stock some pressure washers a few months back. They're $199 each when scanned. The next day I have to put up more, scan them, and they show up as $279 each. Couple of weeks later they're on sale for $199 each. Just to make things clear, they raise the price for a couple of weeks before putting them on sale. They don't just add a sale sticker to it. This isn't with everything that's on sale. Some things are on sale because it's literally just, oh crap, we have too many of these things and nowhere to put them. Or we have a ton of product related to the spring season and now spring is over. Those are actually at a discounted price. There's a guy locally who owns a furniture store and every one of his commercials ends with, "Come to so-and-so furniture where we don't mark it up just to mark it down and call it a sale." I didn't know that was a practice until his commercials started airing. How does that work out for him? Wasn't there a store that also tried to do this and lost lots of money because it turned out that customers love getting lied to? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Let's just say our technology doesn't come close to meeting its process guarantees, but we can give a customer a phone book-sized excuse of why it's their fault. I can't tell which of our vendors this is. Any. Literally any. Out of both healthcare facilities I've worked at, they both made a big deal about not expressing how short-handed we are to the patients. Same at mine. I told them anyway because they wouldn't risk firing a great employee when they're already short-staffed. Not in my current job, but when I worked in retail, we had to process waste food off the floor, waste food being fresh items that had been reduced on their use-by date and then wasted or removed from our stock level because the company didn't want customers to see how much food was wasted. It was a lot. We could process damaged items on floor or items that had been taken out of the fridges and dumped elsewhere by customers but not out-of-date or end-of-life products. We did trial giving our waste food to local homeless shelters, but head office stopped it because it wasn't viable, which I took to mean there wasn't any money in it for the head office. So I pushed them and they said that they were worried there might be lawsuits against the company for giving out-of-date food to people. We could accidentally poison someone, etc. I'm talking trolleys of food. Liquids were poured away and written off, food was placed in bin bags and thrown in huge bins around the back of the store that were locked to stop people digging through them. Some of my colleagues would pour bleach or industrial-strength floor cleaner over it too. I had a problem with wasting so much food and thought the excuses head office gave for not allowing us to donate was rubbish. It was all about bottom line for them. The company itself makes a lot of noise about how environmentally friendly and green they are and how much work they do for charity, when behind the scenes it wasn't like that at all. They had a really crappy attitude towards their staff in general too. I was glad to get out of there. Food retail is the worst retail sector to work in. Their reason for not donating is BS, at least in the US. There are laws to prevent companies from being sued over donated food. I'm a cashier and everyone needs to keep the override card over a mysterious button that is next to a till at customer service. It's attached to a big red light and has a wire connecting it to the phone. Nobody knows what it does and we don't want to find out. That sounds an awful lot like the 911 button that summons the police in case of robbery that many restaurants have. Restaurant employee here. Staff is almost always sick because we get in huge trouble if we take a sick day. Not uncommon to have servers or food expediters throwing up while at work. Strep throat, colds, other contagious diseases, illnesses are always going to show up around the workplace. Mice. We have mice. All my past food service jobs have had mice. Assume any restaurant you eat at has a mouse problem.
Yep, I have pneumonia and was in the hospital for nearly a week. My store manager kept texting asking if I could come in every day. It's like, yeah, I can't breathe, so go F off. They don't care what you have and will try to make you work even if it's contagious. I get running a business because that's what I was doing for nearly 9 years, but some things these inexperienced managers do is ridiculous.
Also, were the mice cooking the food using human marionettes? Well, my job has us hide the sous vide circulator from the health inspector.
What? Why would the health inspector care that you guys are using a circulator? Unless it's filthy, then just clean it. If anything, sous vide is a cleaner way of cooking, because all the good food is cooked in a bag.
Because in North Carolina you have to do what's called a variance to be able to do that. It's so that the health inspectors can make sure you're doing it safely. My workplace does not have the proper variance, therefore they'd get heavily dinged on the inspection. I work at a package store, liquor store for all you non-New Englanders, with a pretty big wine cellar. It's pretty cool, but we can't go down there alone because it's absolutely chock full of snakes. They're only garter snakes, and the reason they've let it continue like this is because they're keeping the mice population at bay. We have a buddy system rule because our managers are terrified someone's going to get bit one day, but for the most part they leave us alone. You guys need to get some super high boots.
Yeah, those can fit way more snakes in them.
Garter snakes are babies, and I've only met aggressive ones in captivity because of the dumb owner. I've yet to meet an aggressive one in the wild. I remember driving to my dog park, which is located on a mountain. I saw a huge one curled up sunning itself on the road. I literally just picked him up and put him on a boulder and the sun, and he was looking at me like, "What the frick, dude? I was comfortable there." But other than that, he was still chilling on the boulder when I drove back down. Keeping snakes because they keep the mice at bay brings to mind the Simpsons ecosystem of using killer gorillas to kill the mongooses, to kill the bird-eating lizards, to kill the pigeons. God, try saying what I just said 5 times back to back. If there's an issue with medication, too many pills, not enough, wrong, we're not allowed to tell them. We just have to leave the room with the meds and call our bosses to fix it. It's pretty easy for them to figure out what's been going on as it's kind of obvious, but we're not actually allowed to say that an error has been made. We're not allowed to be seen sitting. I'm a theatre usher. I had a job as a busser and we were never given breaks. Had a shift that averaged 6 hours and we're not allowed to be seen talking to servers casually. Sitting, and at the tail end of when I worked there, we weren't even allowed to sit in the back. We had up to 10-hour shifts where we had to stand without breaks and look busy. I never realized how much I hated that place until a few days after I quit. Work in security. Any and every unique location to commit a crime you'll get away with. The first time anyway. We don't get the funds to have real cameras over the entire mall, so we move them to blind spots where we suspect based on following other footage of the crime being committed. Then we wait for your stupid butt to go, "Wow, that was easy and nothing happened," and go for round 2. I've talked with peers in Target, Walmart, almost all over the place, and this is a constant. While there are certain high-risk zones that always have functional cameras aimed at them, If you wander off to an odd corner, odds that you'll get away with it time 1 are really good, provided you dodge the employees at the time too. Oh, and along the same vein, park your stupid frickin' car at a different parking lot if you're robbing. This is how we get you, your license plate. You don't even need a mask or a hoodie. Odds are we'll never figure out who you are if you just straight up walk out with crap and off the property. I had a job which claimed all their dressings were homemade, so we had to go back to fill the couple that were not. Also, they would say that none of the desserts were frozen by keeping the freezer for the desserts, and everything else above the standard temperature for a commercial freezer. Everything. Where do I even start? Really, the only thing I'm allowed to tell the customers is this spiel about the place and where the restroom is. I really wish I could help people more than I can, but management actually trained me to actively hide things from people. Literally, I'm supposed to make the customers' lives harder. If I don't do it to management's approval, they go and hide even more things. Then again, I work in an escape room. They had us in the first half, not gonna lie. Current job I'm at told me to lie about the failed maintenance and the budget cuts in my job. At my old job at Walmart, they told me to lie about the malfunctioning fridges and cooled produce that would sit out for 8+ hours before being put into the coolers. When I worked at McDonald's back when I was at high school, there was a time I accidentally filled up a medium soda cup instead of a small for a drive-thru order. I was about to dump it when my manager takes the medium cup from my hand and poured it into a small cup, and it fit perfectly. The small and medium cups are the same volume, just different shapes. They do that at Applebee's too. If you buy a large beer, you're buying a small in a longer glass. My friends asked why I only ordered the small, and when I showed my friends, the waitstaff had a hard time explaining why they were spending more on what I was getting for half the price. Well, this is kind of weird. So my family owned a small bodega, and across from us was another bodega. We had this ripped up blue chair where the counter was, so my grandma, mum, or me, and my brother could sit in between bagging stuff. Every time this old man, middle-aged man or his wife came in, my mum would slowly lower the chair to the ground so they couldn't see. I was a kid and thought it was a game, so I would help. Didn't realize it was weird until I became a teenager. I asked my mum why, and she was reluctant to tell me that they stole the chair from that old man's bodega from when they fired her before I was born. I find it hilarious. In case you're wondering, the old man, middle-aged man and his wife, the old man's son and daughter-in-law, weren't that petty and came in to buy stuff they didn't have at their store. They were also friends with my grandpa. Your fancy catered event? That's tap water. Bonus if your event is done by a company based in a university because your food is probably the same food that is being served in the cafeteria. I work with artists and bands. On the last tour I couldn't tell fans that the artist just didn't want to meet people at the bus, or if she was or wasn't on the bus. She had a paid-for meet and greet, so if they really wanted to meet her, they should have paid for it rather than wait outside near our home on the road. I think that's reasonable. Whether her meet and greets are paid or not, a lot of venues now have security screening, and that might prevent or discourage anyone with Selena, Dimebag, Daryl, Christina Grimmie, John Lennon type ideas. It's just good sense to meet fans in the most controlled environment available. What fact were you taught in high school that you later learned was completely untrue? All of the chemistry, about 3 times. Electrons are little balls that circle around the nucleus. Just kidding, electrons move in these little clouds around a nucleus. Just kidding, electrons move in these different hybrid clouds. Just kidding, electrons are clouds. Just kidding, F you. Also, light only moves in straight lines except when it doesn't. Our gym teacher told us your body temperature increases by 40 degrees when you run. When we pointed out you go to the hospital with a fever of 103, she told us it was different and to stop acting smug. That's why she teaches gym. Maybe she confused temperature and heart rate? The sun is half star, half planet. I had a middle school teacher who told us that Buddhists have to pray to Buddha 3 times a day. Took me until high school before I realized he was probably thinking about Judaism. You can't take a bigger number away from a smaller number. Oh my god, yes. I remembered when we learned about negative numbers. I was so gosh darn teed off and upset. Nowadays, I tutor young kids, and when this question comes up, I will take the time to try and explain it in a very simple way that won't cloud or confuse them. One time, though, a kid got excited about what he learned and showed it to a friend and came back to me next week and said his teacher said I was wrong and that it's impossible to subtract big numbers from a small one. Come on. I can understand a teacher not wanting to confuse kids with negative numbers when they're just learning subtraction, But to straight up lie and say that it's impossible to do it is abhorrent. What's wrong with saying, yes, you can do that, and you'll learn that another time, but right now we're only going to subtract small numbers from bigger numbers? And if a kid actually learns how to do it, that teacher should encourage them. Thanks for being awesome and teaching the kids the right thing. I remember this being introduced quite early in my education, but it is entirely possible that that's just a different country's education system. Also, basic negatives are a very important concept when it comes to personal finances, stating the obvious for those who haven't considered it. In Of Mice and Men, Curly wore a leather glove filled with Vaseline. Our teacher told us it was so he could beat his wife with a softer hand. She was too embarrassed to tell us it was for getting busy. Am I the only one who finds it sad that beating his wife is more socially appropriate answer than doing the deed with his wife? That's America for you. There's even a joke about it. How do you allow an undressed woman to appear in an American movie with just a PG rating? Put a lot of bullets through her. There was a scene in Hannibal, a very violent and gory TV show, where a man and a woman's skin is peeled off their backs and raised to look like wings. The two were au naturel in this scene, shown from behind and waist up, but the network had an issue with the fact that the man's butt crack was ever so slightly visible. The show's solution? Give him a line of blood dripping down his back to make his crack less visible. I'm not even joking. Benjamin Franklin discovering electricity by flying a kite with a key on it. No, he didn't discover it, he invented it. The phenomenon of electrons moving around never happened until he flew that kite. Just like fire never existed before the cavemen, right? Adults kept telling me that people would offer me free substances. You want some dip? No thanks, I don't do dip. Good, don't start. An actual conversation I had. In 7th grade health class, we were learning about pancreatic cancer and the disease's other variants in other parts of the body. My teacher explained to the class that it can be only located on or in major organs. A few seconds after he said that, I raised my hand and said, "My grandpa had surgery to get it removed in his knee. A knee isn't a major organ, is it?" And this teacher thought about it for a minute and realized he was completely wrong and just responded with saying, "I'm not sure, let's move on." Oh crap, the knee is a major organ. We're screwed! Well, to be fair, I'm sure he didn't have it in his knee, but maybe bone cancer in his knee, or something like that. I obviously don't know all the different types, but I'm pretty sure it's always on an organ, major or not. Many of you have been trying to correct me that bones are not organs, but apparently blood is not an organ. So if you absolutely need to find a way to correct the statement I said I was pretty sure about, you can cite leukemia. Cracking your knuckles will give you arthritis. I was doing it regardless of that myth. It's not like I didn't believe it, but sometimes you just have to crack your damn knuckles because your hand has a cramp or something. Very relieved to find out it was a myth. Men and women have a different number of ribs. Also some stuff about the Antichrist, but I didn't believe that. That everyone believed the world was flat until Columbus proved them wrong. Additionally, that Columbus went to his grave not knowing that he hadn't landed in the West Indies. If I recall correctly, there's a diary entry written by him acknowledging that what he had landed in was a new continent. I'm literally 100% sure that some Greek dude proved it was round by sticking a stick in the ground and measuring some angles and shadow lengths. Also, Magellan was yelling that the world was like a melon years before Columbus sailed. Was taught about Magellan's yelling in history class in middle school. Apparently Magellan wasn't old enough to do any reasonable yelling when Columbus went sailing. So add that to the list of things taught wrong. Apparently the Greek dude already knew the world was round and was trying to figure out the size of it. Add that to the list. The entire rhyme, which I've now learned is incorrect, was taught to me in middle school. It goes, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, while Magellan was still yellin' that the world was like a melon. Everything about chemistry. In grade 9, we were introduced to chemistry. Then in the later grades, they were like, everything you were taught was essentially wrong. We did it to simplify things. Here's how it actually is. Then in university, they go, lol, everything you were taught in high school was wrong. It's actually like this. Looking back, I wasn't bad at chemistry, I always did well, but because of this constant flip-flopping, I'm still confused about some of the basics, for example, acids. I remember taking the AP Chem exam, and my sister was in college studying biochem, and I heard her say to her friend, Gen Chem is a lie. After that, I started searching for clues. I finally got it when, after the unit on ideal gases, I asked why they're called ideal gases, and realized everything we just learned basically didn't apply to real life. But only a very small percentage of things, or they'd always say, there's an exception to this rule, and then it turned out mostly everything was the exception to the rule. I was so irritated. Actually, the ideal gas law is a pretty good approximation of the real thing in most cases. You'd be surprised. It isn't wrong, it's just not 100% accurate. However, it is a useful tool for thinking about how gases really do behave, so it's not a waste of time to learn it at all. Basically, it's as though you first learned that pi is equal to 3, and then in high school learned actually it's 3.14, then in college learned really it's closer to 3.14159. Were any of those things actually wrong? Not really. None of those things are totally correct either, but then why would you bother memorizing 500,000 digits of pi? What would that get you, really? I was today years old when I was hit with the knowledge that ideal gases are an approximation of a pure gas instead of how most of it is found. I guess you learn something every week with this job. That you have to round up all the numbers after the decimal point. Example 1.07883666272, round the 0 to a 1, the 7 to an 8, 8 to a 9, etc. That people in slavery were paid, just not very much, and they were given a choice between a penny and a dime, but chose the penny because it was bigger, as if that was somehow less racist. What the frick? It's illegal to sell yo-yos at yard sales. You only use 10% of your brain. Fricking liars. That the ancient Romans had places called vomitoriums where they would go and gorge themselves on food, then spew to make room for more. Gross, right? Kind of like that one scene in Catching Fire. Vomitoriums were actually a sort of hallway designed for spectators to exit the Colosseum and other arenas as efficiently as possible. I never knew that. They did show us pictures of big rooms with a lot of holes around the walls. Turns out those were public toilets. I simply assumed the vomit room looked slightly different, but they printed the wrong picture. Also, so many erroneous pictures in schoolbooks. So many. As a Latin teacher, I constantly have to correct students, teachers, and parents about what a vomitorium is. The most common response I hear is, "But it's in the Hunger Games books." Yeah, those are about a fictional society. That there wasn't any air combat during World War I because the planes were only used for scouting. What about the Red Baron? Didn't a lot of planes back then essentially try to kill each other with handheld pistols fired from the cockpit? In the earliest days, yes. It gets a lot more sophisticated pretty fast, especially with the development of synchronization devices that allowed automatic weapons to fire through propellers. As a teacher, I have a few rules for myself to avoid becoming one of these teachers. 1. Always admit you are wrong about something when you are. It's important for kids to know you're fallible, like everyone else on the planet, and that it's okay to be wrong about stuff every once in a while. 2. Use discussion paired with internet searches to try and find what the correct answer actually is. I teach 2nd grade, so we don't exactly have to go to Google Scholar, but we definitely go over the importance of checking over multiple sources and not believing everything we read on the internet. 3. Teach kids that it's okay not to know something or have a misconception about something. The pursuit of truth is infinitely more important than knowing something outright. Although it's not embedded in our curriculum, I take time every day to explicitly teach critical thinking skills. I actively do this too. Thanks for letting me know that there are teachers who know how to be wrong and how to fact-check and be open to multiple interpretations. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. George Washington cut down a cherry tree. Also not exactly untrue, but I have no idea why we need to practice recorders. I think recorders are probably the simplest, cheapest wind instrument, and teaching music is healthy, exercising a kid's brain in a different artistic way. Usually this is taught in the 4th or 5th grade, so by middle school they can choose a complicated, specialized instrument and join band or orchestra. That I wouldn't be paid to stare out the window all day. I'm a pilot. My 7th grade health teacher, "Black people can't swim. Their bones are much denser than ours. I've seen black kids jump into the pool. They just sink like rocks." Imagine my surprise when moving away from Union, Indiana. Oh my god, when was this if you don't mind me asking? My health teacher in the 7th grade told us all Native Americans have high cheekbones. If someone has high cheekbones, they're native, like Michael Jackson. Where in the frick are these 7th grade teachers being educated? Is anyone else a bit nervous there's a Klan university that we don't know about? Blood is blue when it's inside your body. When I was in 6th grade, the smartest kid in the class told us this. The kid was legit smart in math and was many years ahead of us. I disagreed. Everyone else agreed with the smart guy, even the teacher. I asked how come when doctors draw blood, it's red. He said because there's oxygen in the needle and that it turns the blood red. Fair enough. I then asked how would anyone know it was blue. He said something about vacuums. At that point, the class lost focus. I lost, he won. He is wrong though, and I'm vindicated. While silly Americans spent millions building a zero-gravity pen that could write in space, the Russians used pencils. Actually, NASA programs previously used pencils, but because of the substantial dangers that broken pencil tips and graphite dust posed to electronics in zero gravity, the flammable nature of wood present in pencils, and the inadequate quality documentation produced by non-permanent or smeared record keeping, a better solution was needed. Russian cosmonauts used pencils and grease pencils on plastic slates until also adopting a space pen in 1969, with a purchase of 100 units for use on all future missions. NASA never approached Paul Fisher, the inventor, to develop a pen, nor did Fisher receive any government funding for the pen's development. Fisher invented it independently and then, in 1965, asked NASA to try it. After extensive testing, NASA decided to use the pens in future Apollo missions. I was always fed this one, with varying degrees of smugness about how stupid Americans were, by my science teachers no less. Turns out the Americans were making a calculated decision to not get graphite in their instruments. That there were different sections of the tongue for salty, sweet, sour, and bitter taste buds.
I remember testing this myself once. I took some piece of candy and stuck it on a sweet zone, then on some other zone and thought it tasted exactly the same. Even as a kid, I wasn't sure about the legitimacy of this claim. We did this during Girl Scouts. Everyone was like, wow, it works. And I'm sitting there like, sure.
This was a very popular science experiment in schools and youth groups. Probably repeated millions of times and demonstrated the conclusion even though it was absolutely bogus and in fact completely untrue. It should be a warning about the power of assumptions and a reminder of the effort required by scientists who actually do meaningful experiments and get valid results. It isn't easy. Because teachers convinced us that you couldn't begin a sentence with because, I believed it to be true.
And they told you not to start a sentence with a conjunction, and that hell would make a special room for you should you decide a proposition would be a good word to end on.
Ending a sentence with a proposition is something up with which I will not put. Winston Churchill. Back in 7th grade life class, my female teacher and mother of 3 told us that girls cannot have a climax. Looking back, I honestly feel bad for the woman. How can you go through life and have 3 children of your own without ever knowing that you could have a climax? 1. Future employers will see how many detentions you've had during school. 2. There are 52 states in the USA. This was a mistake in a textbook, so this was taught to a whole generation of Austrians, probably also Germans. 3. In a geography class, a student asked why the north of Ireland was a part of the UK. The professor replied, because Ireland gave it to the British. Coming from a very patriotic Irish family, this was a shock to say the least. 4. High school students told me how professors in college and university don't help you with anything and you're completely on your own. After explaining difficulty I had with one of my papers to my professor, he gave me the names of about 5 to 6 authors he knows who write on the subject and essentially gave me half my research. Another time, a professor actually loaned me a copy of the book the library was out of, so I could photocopy a chapter I needed for my final paper. Most of my professors would answer questions over email or after class too. In most cases, professors help more than high school teachers. I knew it at the time, but my science teacher in the 8th grade taught that the Big Bang Theory was the idea that the moon was formed by a collision between Earth and a Mars-sized asteroid. I told her this was not the case, and her excuse was that it was simplified so that everyone could understand it better. To be clear, I know that that is how the moon was formed, but the teacher was trying to say this was the Big Bang, like the beginning of the universe, even wording it as such. Yes, the Moon and the modern Earth were formed by a massive impact between proto-Earth and another object called Theia. This is, however, not the Big Bang Theory and was not the beginning of the universe. First year in college, the year was 2000. My intro to Comp Sci professor looked at me with 2 heads when I asked him if the exams were open book. His response, after the shocked pause, was something along the lines of,
"Do you think you'll have access to the book when you go into the real world?"
It was my time to mirror his look of shock as I'd completed my 2nd year of co-op employment through my trade school where I was employed as a DB admin and web developer and had not only books to reference but also w3school.com bookmarked in Internet Explorer 6. In kindergarten, the teacher's aide told us that north is always forward no matter what direction you're facing. During recess, I figured out which way north really was and told her. Her response was, "Only if you're facing that way." I think she thought that we were unable to understand north, south, east, west, and she got really mad at me when I proved her wrong. Until she was eventually fired a few years later, she tried to punish me with anything possible. For example, when I talked during lunch, she moved me to a different table.
Some motherfrickers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Trolling before the age of the internet. Also, when you see the moon, that's actually the sun after the Lightmaster General has turned down the dimmer for the day. Tell all your parents about our recent budget cuts. That the Vietnam War was a tie.
That's putting it pretty generously.
In fairness, the Viet Cong haven't reached DC yet. To be fair, there's a substantial number of people both in the States and abroad who either just don't know who won that war, or who outright think that the US won it. It doesn't help that most Vietnam War movies tend to end in one battle that the US comes out on top of. Was taught in middle school that the US has never been invaded outside of Pearl Harbor. War of 1812, Britain used troops from Canada to enter the US. We surrendered Detroit. Later on, British troops burned down the White House. Remember the famous painting of George Washington? It was rescued from the fire from Dolly Madsen. World War II, Aleutian Islands. A small Japanese force occupied the islands of Attu and Kiska, but the remoteness of the islands and the difficulties of the weather and terrain meant that it took nearly a year for a far larger US and Canadian force to eject them. There were also reports of German World War II U-boats off the East Coast and Japanese balloon bombs in Washington state. I was in my early 20s when I started learning on my own about history. Went to private Christian school. The one I always got was, when you're out of college and in the real world, you need to be firm with your faith. People will challenge you left and right. Professors might try to debate you and break you down, and other people will be bombarding your faith everywhere you go. Thanks for the scare tactics, but the most conflict I've had was with a classmate, and it went, "Oh, you're Christian? I was raised Catholic, but I'm an atheist now. What did you get for number 7? Instructor at a state school here. If anything, most of us are terrified to even touch on the topic of religion in class, for fear of bringing up a debate where nobody is going to budge. If we come out as religious, we're prejudiced. If we don't, we're queer, liberal, atheist, hippie feminists who would love nothing better than to rip your faith to shreds in front of you. It's a lose-lose, man. I just pretend like it doesn't exist, and I teach in the humanities."
You're telling me teachers don't like to bring up complicated discussions that inevitably lead to everybody getting really angry, tons of drama, and waste a lot of time? Weird.
I discovered in college that the more know-it-all you were about your beliefs on religious subjects, the more pushback you got from everybody else. You can be religious like Mr. Rogers was religious, and nobody will want to argue with you. You can be religious like Fred Phelps was religious, and people will get in your face all the time. That you don't have any rights in school. Like at all. No freedom of speech, no freedom of expression, nothing. This was in public school in the early 2000s.
I mean, your rights are limited though.
I remember being in a grade 10 science class and learning that everything I learned in grade 9 science was a lie. From what I understand, sciences are just one of a long chain of, okay, it's not like that, it's actually more like this. Wikipedia is a terrible resource that's often inaccurate because literally anyone can instantly change literally any article. Wikipedia checks every edit within 24 hours if I recall correctly, and they definitely screen new users somehow. I tried editing a small backwater page once for craps and giggles, and my edit never happened. More importantly, Wikipedia has stood up to every instance of cross-referencing that I've done, and I've written a decent number of research papers.
Whenever I was told I couldn't use Wikipedia as a resource, I'd do it anyway, but I would click the links that Wikipedia cited, make sure the info was there in a way I could reasonably comprehend, and would cite that instead. I'm a master's student, and I do that too. Previous PhD student here, I used Wikipedia when writing my thesis. I had a psychology class in high school where we did the whole unit on dream interpretation, Jungian symbols and the metaphor of different events. Get to college and one psychology degree later, I've been told about 15 times that Jung was too high to find his toes and is barely more credible than Freud. Dream interpretation is basically useless. Who is the most delusional person you've known? I work in a small-town radio station. I've seen a lot of rookies fresh out of broadcast school let the tiny amount of fame they get from being on a small-town radio station go to their head. This one guy came into work one day, madder than hell that small-town radio famous wasn't enough to get him out of a speeding ticket. My brother was always bragging about how chicks he worked with wanted to bang him. Then after 2 or 3 months, when he inevitably quit or got fired, whenever the guys were talking about chicks they hooked up with, he would always talk about these beautiful women that wanted him, which he just never got around to hooking up with.
One time, after starting a new job, he comes home all excited and yells, "Holy crap, the receptionist at this place is gorgeous, and guess what? She wants to F me." I said, "Dude, you've been there one day. How do you know she wants to F you?" So he says, "Well, I just walked through the front door, and as I was passing by, she looks me dead in the eye and says, 'Good morning.'" Oh my god, I lost it with that last bit. Good morning equals she wants to bang me? That's the most delusional thing I've ever heard. My current boss. He thinks the business is doing okay or is in a rough spot. He's slowly choking and killing it with his managing. I see the shop closing in mid to late August. Won't you feel stupid when it closes in early September? Seriously though, I hope he turns it around quick and that you don't lose your job, and if you do, I hope you find something quickly. Worked a night job where I met someone who was studying rather than going to school. Eventually I got out of him that he was studying to be a seducer. He studied Cleopatra, Rasputin, Casanova, etc. to learn the art of seduction. Basically, this guy's life plan was to just seduce his way through life. He had an intricate plan on how he was going to seduce our supervisor for a raise, seduce multiple spouses to support him, even how to get free coffee by seducing the barista. He must have done a lot of seducing to keep working that barely over minimum wage night job for years. Sounds like he put his buy into charisma and his dump stat is intelligence. Ah, the charismatic idiot savant playthrough of life. Sounds like this man was trying to go for a path of life that would have got him into the gold diggers video we did a few weeks ago. Better luck next time, failed social climber. My aunt, as in my mum's sister. She constantly stirs drama with other people and then calls you out for being mean to her. What the frick, lady? For example, one time I came outside and I see her pull up in her car. She starts chit-chatting to my mum. They're talking about her haircut. I tell my mum we needed to go and she drove away shortly after. Totally fine. I get a call from another relative a week later that she's angry with me because the day she came over I rolled my eyes and she reads lips. She knows I said something about her. This didn't happen. She then continues to post on social media how karma is going to get me, while simultaneously commenting on all of my stuff, saying how cute my daughter is. Delusion. This is my aunt exactly. She's also a drama queen. I visit my family once a year for a week, so I go to see my aunt and my mom at the same time. Every year, my aunt will cause some drama. This year, she launched into a casual conversation with me and just said, "You know your boyfriend kinda looks like a rat?" Told her that's not an okay thing to say. She said the truth hurts to hear. I got angry and left. Next morning she waltzes in like nothing happened, asks me to come and give her a hug hello. I say no, explaining that what she said was really hurtful. She then flips her crap and starts screaming, "Why are you always starting stuff up like this? We never get into fights when you're not here, you're always causing trouble." I was so shocked, I just left. A very, very good friend of mine comes from a super rich family. His dad recently bought $1 million home to sell to him for under $300,000. He thinks his family isn't that wealthy and that this isn't that abnormal. There's always been a number of Ask Reddit threads like "Who's the richest person you know?" and they're always fascinating reading. There are people like your friend who have no idea that it's not normal to be able to buy $1 million home or a yacht without blinking. One of my favorite comments was about a clueless girl from a very rich family who visited an equally rich friend. Friend's daddy had just bought her a huge, gorgeous penthouse apartment in Manhattan. Clueless friend looked around the place and said, "Wow, this is really nice. How much do you think the rent here would be? $1,000 a month?" Then she looked confused when the guy who wrote the story, who wasn't rich, started laughing. "I mean, it's a banana, Michael. What would it cost? $10? For those wondering, penthouse rent in Manhattan is probably somewhere around $15K per month. My little sister. Me and my eldest sister were raised by an alcoholic mother who left us with random people so she could get drunk. When I was about 6, my mum sobered up and had my little sister. The girl is delusional and has adopted the idea that she went through what me and my older sister went through. She recalls memories that never happened. She swears my mum beat her. Never happened. She makes up stories like she was a mortician, traveled around the world, she dated such and such, and had tons of money. It's so weird. She spends every waking moment on Facebook and posts every single thing that goes on in her life. She has a felony, she beat her baby daddy until they broke up, and now both of those psychos have really crappy custody fights going on. I could go on and on. Sounds like a compulsive liar. I dated one of those. Frick all that. My schizophrenic uncle. He ran away from home in the US in his teens to Turkey, converted to Islam, came home a few years later. Believed he was the son of God and robbed a bank so that he could give the money to the homeless in the city we live in. He was institutionalized for many years and was released one day with no notice to our family, and died shortly thereafter of an accident caused by his mental illness.
Well, I can't fault his intentions.
This dude who used to live near me. There's a laundry list of stories, but 2 gems are when he took those fake billion-dollar bills you can get at Halloween from church groups to Walmart, filled 8 shopping carts with random expensive stuff, mostly electronics, and tried to buy them with the, quote, money. Or when, after the cops were called on him for shooting our much younger brother with an airsoft gun, he grabbed a samurai sword and charged at the cops. Spoiler alert, he got tased. He later told us if they shot at him, he would cut the bullets in half, like Ryan Reynolds did in X-Men Origins Wolverine.
That dude is lucky he didn't get shot. I realize the dude was probably white. That said, getting shot by the police can happen to anyone, and if you try to attack a police officer with a potentially lethal weapon, you can reasonably expect for it to happen to you. The cops understood that their bullets were of no use in the situation. He had been studying the blade since he was but a child.
My ex-boyfriend plays the victim to his friends and family, yet I've spoken to 2 of his exes and we've all called the cops on him at some point. He obsesses and stalks and plays weird games. He tried to break into my apartment once after we broke up to apologize to me and tried to convince my roommate I was unstable and making rash choices. We've been broken up 7 months now. I have a new boyfriend and he still sends me emails saying I'm being unreasonable. This reminds me of my uncle. 3 out of 4 of his wives have literally fled from him in the dead of night. One of them took their daughter and sought asylum in Germany, where her mother was a citizen. He's a criminal and a sociopath, but neither he nor my grandparents see it. Some years ago, my grandfather had to get triple bypass surgery. There were some complications. He was in the hospital for months, and no one knew if he was ever going to make it out again. When he finally did, he discovered that the same uncle had stolen over $1 million from him over the months he was in hospice. Did my grandfather finally see him for what he was? Nope. He blamed my uncle's most recent ex-wife, calling her the criminal mastermind. She was the stupidest woman I've ever met, but at least she was smart enough to get away from him. Met a guy in the psych ward with psychosis who believed that he was a prophet. Really nice guy. I've a quote written by him. "Madness is not pure error, it is nature's dissatisfaction with genius." My grandmother was a psych nurse in a ward years ago, and she encountered a patient who was convinced he was the second coming of Jesus. He even walked like Jesus. She said, "If I hadn't known he was nuts, I might have believed him." Back in the day when mental health experiments were just doctors saying, "I wonder what happens when we combine these specific types of crazy people," there was a case where doctors put 3 second coming of Jesus guys together to see what would happen. Anticlimactically, each of the 3 merely thought the other 2 were poor, deluded souls. I wanted them to merge into one super prophet. We are Threesus. I would like to thank everyone who combined their stories into that last exchange. The humor can be hard to come by in scripts about the mentally ill or deluded. I spent the first 11 months of my army career with this one guy who had absolutely no idea that everybody hated him. He had this horrible personality where he talked too loud, said frick all the time, stole crap, and fricked with other people's stuff, and just seemed kind of like an alien trying to mimic heterosexual male interactions. But the alien had only studied bad sports movies and war films. He was incredibly cringy. Guy was raised by a single mother that clearly allowed him to get away with anything, and in 11 months I knew him, I never once heard him take responsibility for anything. An example, we'll call him PH for dialogue purposes. We're in the lunch line and he gets a big bowl of clam chowder soup, he spills a little over the side of the bowl and onto the tray, and we're like, looks like you spilled a bit. Keep in mind we saw him spill it. PH? No, I didn't spill it. Well, who spilled it then? Frick, I don't frickin' know. I guess someone frickin' knocked me and made the bowl spill. As I said, he swore all the time. You know you swear too much when a bunch of army dudes think you swear too much. Yeah, literally couldn't take responsibility for spilling a little bit of soup in a tray. As said though, the most delusional aspect of his personality was his complete inability to accept that nobody liked him. When our final course, combat engineer training, finished, and we were all about to get posted off to our respective units and bases across the country, he'd always talk about how he was going to hang with the people who were going to the same place as him, and maybe be roommates with one of them. To a man, each one of them never wanted to see him ever again. It took on average about 2 weeks from the point of meeting him to completely despise him, and he was never once aware or willing to admit this. As said by one of our sergeants at the end of our course, at the course party, that kid's a frickin' lunatic. Couldn't have said it better myself. Are you talking about Sterling Archer? Isn't it funny how we all love Archer, but if he were real and we were friends with him, we would just think he's a pathetic idiot. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My cousin has insisted to my family that I get exorcised because I'm gay and autistic. She thinks that only the devil himself can corrupt someone to my extent. The problems with her theory are that I'm neither gay nor autistic, and she's the one touched by Satan. This reminds me of that Yahoo Answers post where someone said his mom made him wear a butt plug at all times when he was 5, or Satan would violate him and make him gay. That's nowhere near as bad as that Facebook trend where moms would give their wee kids bleach enemas and then point at the shredded colon lining and say, "Look at that big worm that came out of him. That's what caused his autism." People are effed. Guy at my college thought he was God's gift to women just because he worked out daily. He looked more like an albino Dwayne Johnson with curly hair. It was like Casper took roids and started hitting on anything that moved. That last sentence made me really feel like I could hate him and be justified in doing so. I love unrepentant buttholes that I can take out all of the rage I have stored up from my day-to-day life on. Mine is my boyfriend's best friend in the whole world, and he's a frickin' nutter. Sometimes it's funny to hear him explain his theories, but other times it's sad and frustrating. I care about him, but often worry that he may be mentally ill. A few examples: that the Earth is flat and that NASA and all the other scientists are in on the secret and want to keep it from the public. They don't want us to know because it somehow directly proves God's existence, and they don't want that. All ice cream starts as vanilla ice cream until you add flavors to it. He thinks the absence of added flavor is vanilla. The government uses airplanes to spray us all with metal particles that makes people have autism. Also related, he doesn't believe that regular clouds are made out of water vapor. He thinks that semen never leave the female body after people do the deed and that it collects in the uterus somewhere. If a woman does the deed with multiple men over the course of her life, then her child will genetically be a mixture of all those men. This is why he thinks God wants us to only do the deed with our husband or wife. Do I even need to keep going? Okay then, prior to his flat earth theory where he believed in space and NASA and whatnot, he saw a photo of what looked like the claw or hand of a Jurassic Park dinosaur in the corner of a photo taken from Mars. This was clearly a clickbait bullcrap internet photo, but he believed it to be real. He said, "I think they got the whole creature on camera, but they're just showing a hand so that we don't all freak out at once." He told me that he thought keto diet was just fat. Yes, you heard that right, just fat. I told him that's borderline impossible because if you were to eat just fat, you'd essentially just be eating olive oil and butter, so not only would you crap your brains out, you'd also never get any vitamins or nutrients, which you need to live. He didn't understand. In a religious debate, how can you prove that Christianity is the religion of truth if every other religion believes it is the truth? I told him it isn't solid evidence to use the Bible, because most religions have their own sacred scriptures that refute the Bible. If everyone believes their book, using yours won't make a difference. He told me I was being hormonal, and that's why I didn't see eye to eye with him. Are you satisfied yet? Alright, a few more because it feels great to get a chance to share some of these. He recently informed me that God taught him that watering your grass will make it green. I told him that that was just standard lawn maintenance and general knowledge, but he argued that only those who know the Lord take the time to water their lawns. He doesn't understand what door-to-door salesmen are. One was at his house asking his grandfather, the homeowner, for some info to complete an order he was making. He wanted his name, phone number, and the exact address. My friend thought it was incredibly suspicious that he just showed up, even though the guy had on a uniform and a marked vehicle, so he called the cops, who were very confused when they arrived. He firmly believes that fat people are fat because of cake. Not trans fats, not excess sugar, not hidden calories and misleading portion sizes, just cake. If you try to pry further, he'll explain that there's nowhere you can go where you can't buy some form of cake. It's delicious and horrible for you. That's why people are so fat, 'cause cake is too yummy and too easy to get. When I tried to tell him that in that way he's right, but it's more of an issue of junk food rather than just the cake, he said, "You wouldn't know 'cause you've never been fat. I have, so I would know." We'll end this with my boyfriend's favorite. He thinks that the birds outside his window are watching him. Keep in mind, his house is 2 floors and he's on the 2nd floor, which is right at eye level with the tree in the front yard, which has a huge bird feeder. And yet he thinks that for whatever reason, these birds are obsessed with him and watch him 24/7. I can't decide if I want to watch nothing but this man's life on TV, or if I've already heard way too much about him. This is why you need to get off the internet and go outside from time to time, people. After this video, of course.
It's the vanilla ice cream part of the story that's really bothering me.
It makes sense to someone who just barely understands language and flavors because we use vanilla to describe something that's plain. But really, it's not that hard to look up the actual plant it comes from, so they're not only operating on extremely basic understandings, they're clearly refusing to even attempt to enhance it. My little sister, who somehow got it into her head that we grew up in the ghetto. We didn't, and that it is okay to just keep popping out kids with different baby daddies because if God didn't want me to have babies, he wouldn't let me get pregnant. Oh my freaking god, I want to hit her in the face every time she says something like this. By the way, she's now pregnant with her 5th child, right after being a complete hypocrite when she got pregnant last year and had a termination because she wanted a girl. She's finally having her girl, so hopefully she stops. And before I get a bunch of angry messages, she lives off the government. Baby daddies do not support their kids, so she brags about being a hustler. My uncle decided his thoughts were so profound, he tried selling printed canvases with some of his quotes on them. Yes, sentences he came up with himself. And no, he's not successful or any sort of leader in his field, nor anything that would warrant quoting or displaying anything he's ever said. He also decided to write a book of his life, of which he's achieved sucking my auntie dry of money and contact with her family because none of us want to be around him. Spiritually pious and delusions of grandeur. My father. The man does not live in the same reality as the rest of us. He's almost 60 and thinks he's going to make it in the music business, despite the fact that he has no band and plays no gigs. He's a passable guitar player, but the typical guy that had a band in the 70s and early 80s. Takes himself way too seriously as if he's some kind of prolific musician. He took some mediocre pictures of the band Genesis in the 80s and has called himself a photographer since then. He built himself and a couple of friends some very primitive websites and calls himself a web designer. He took a, as in one, class on sound engineering at the community college in like 1980 and calls himself a sound engineer. He even has a couple of video cameras and knows the basics of video editing and now bills himself as a videographer for local bands. The man just makes crap up to make himself seem important. He hasn't had an actual job in 13 years. He's been self-employed in that time, but you need to have actual clients and stuff. He thinks he's above everyone, the smartest guy in the room, and he's just this grand person. It's ridiculous. I don't know how his wife puts up with it. An ex-friend of mine cried multiple times because she thought guys were only interested in me and not her, and that I must be doing something insane to attract their attention since she's the skinnier and more obsessed with her looks one. My guess, her personality was probably repulsive after 2 weeks tops. I'm guessing she was clingy too. She probably also wasn't nearly as attractive as she thought she was and confused skinny with hot. Definitely my uncle. He claims to be the descendant of some wealthy noble family from Germany and goes around genealogy websites adding himself and my grandmother to said family, claiming she's a princess. Not my dad though, he doesn't count. This is only the latest one. He's also pretended to be a priest and a diplomat at some point, as well as having several diseases, so he could get money, sympathy from people, and heavy prescription drugs. HIV, melanoma, Parkinson's, the list goes on. We tried having him admitted, but he always gets discharged a day or two later, since he's very good at convincing everyone that he's fine and that it's us who wants him out of the picture. Man, I thought most of these would be funny, but now I'm kind of sad. It's terrifying to think that people can go their whole lives, their one-shot at existence, being so sheltered and afraid. What a bummer. My friend's ex went off her bipolar meds because she was convinced that love was the cure to her bipolar disorder. I feel better now, so that means I don't need my meds anymore. Bipolar isn't a bacterial infection. You don't take meds for a while and then you're cured of it. Weirdly, they broke up after about the millionth violent mood swing, and now she spends her days getting fired from every single job and doing hallucinogenics. Both my aunt and uncle on my mum's side of the family, mum's brother and his wife, my grandmother's health was declining and my uncle fully supported my aunt so she didn't work. Instead of putting my grandmother in a home, they offered to move her into their house so my aunt could take care of her. Meanwhile, my mum was in the process of divorcing my dad, selling the house and working 70 hours a week to keep up at a job she hated. In the midst of all that, my aunt asked if my mum could come over to be with my grandmother on the day she was meeting with the lawyer to finalize her divorce. Mum said she couldn't make it, and my aunt told her that if she really loved her mother, she'd make time and would move her appointment with the lawyer, even though she came to the house every day after work to see her. Finally, my mum admitted to my uncle, her brother, that she was suicidal and wanted a way out. He then proceeded to tell her that she was a horrible person and was useless because she didn't want to help. That was years ago and no one in my family has said a word to them since. We've all moved on and are very happy without them. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.